Hey everybody, Peter Agoston here. Thanks for tuning into the House List. In lieu of any opening theme music, out of respect to those who died in the fire at the Ghost Ship Warehouse show last week in the Fruitvale section of Oakland, and those whose family members were directly involved. I know I had a lot of friends that had friends at that show, and it just reverberates on such a deep level that goes well beyond the media, that it strikes such a chord that I think only people that truly are involved in that scene can really hear, and that exists all over the country and really all over the world for warehouse spaces, house show spaces, sort of experimental DIY, all ages, like music and art spaces, collectives. What happened in Oakland was a complete fucking tragedy that has left a lot of people heartbroken and detached, and lost a lot of innocent, young, great people. And we're learning now more and more about each and every one of those individuals, which is more heartbreaking as the days go by. And I can't even get into talking about the owner or any of the people that owned the building and the guy that ran the space. That's not really something I want to focus on myself, but I do want to remember the people that came out to that show, that were either performing or just went to have a good time, or were drug out there by their friends, or just what was going on that night. And that happens every city and town in this country, in Portland and Seattle and Vancouver and Humboldt County, in LA and San Diego and across the country, Nashville, Birmingham, Chicago. Those are places where these rooms all exist, and deep in Brooklyn, Philly, Florida, Detroit, Toronto, Montreal, just like Boston. There's these rooms and these spaces that aren't on people's radar unless that's where you're going, and I know I've like many of my friends and the people that listen to this podcast, that's where we book shows, that's where we go to shows, and that's where we've been doing that for many years, and that's existed for many, many years. So just an unfathomable loss. It's impossible to articulate. So I wanted to say something at the beginning of the show, and I'm going to say something about it next week too. It's something that's on my mind. I've been watching it from afar, and I do want to send a lot of love out to all my friends in Oakland and San Francisco Bay Area, and anyone that has any friends that were directly or indirectly affected, especially if you lost someone that was at that show. So from me to you, that could have been any of us at any time in any given weekend or weekday, where whether we're performing or we booked the show or we're selling merch or we just came to hang out with our friends, especially if you're under 21. So, and a lot of the people that lost their lives there were young people. So with that being said, this show is with a promoter, and he's a great promoter, and I'm gonna let the theme music play and then come back in a sec and just take a beat here. Yes. Welcome to The House List. I am your host, Peter Agoston. This is my weekly podcast. On the show today, we have New York, now London-based show promoter, concert promoter, Jake Szufnarowski. I recorded another intro where I mispronounced his name like 25 times. But you may know him as Jake from Rocks Off, Jake, the booker of Brooklyn Bowl, London. Yes, there is a Brooklyn Bowl venue in London. He's the talent buyer, the booker, the promoter, the curator, whatever word that you choose to describe the person that arranges, negotiates the deals, and sets up the shows at a music venue. My history, a big part of my music history is as a promoter, as either a talent buyer, as a independent promoter, if you will. Those are the taglines. That's the jargon. You can kind of label it however you choose. That and as a booking agent. So I've done shows in big rooms and small rooms. I'm not the big arena promoter booking agent guy, but I've done, many different small size rooms. So promoters have most promoters, not all of them, but the good ones, the hardworking, real salt of the earth, the no nonsense guys and gals have a special place in my heart. And Jake is one of them. On this, we talk about all types of stuff. And we talk about Dick Dale. We talk about ICP. We talk about Kid Rock. We talk about all these crazy stories that Jake sort of found himself in. And it's amazing. And what's even more amazing that he's doing this thing for his friend who passed away last year, Rodney Speed, who was his bandmate. And as a way to raise money for an educational fund at the Berklee College of Music in Boston, Jake is running 3 miles a day, every day for a whole year, which totals out to 366 days. That's what it's going to be for him. Running for Rodney, it's like a thing that he has, like a YouTube series sort of showing it, because he's going all over the world too doing it. And it's just cool. It's just a cool ass thing that you do for a friend. And he's a good dude. So we talk about that. And so if you are into booking shows, or if you want to get into it, or if you have been doing it for the last 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years or more, then I think you'll kind of connect with a lot of the stuff that we talk about on this episode. As always, I appreciate you guys checking this out. This is a DIY, modest thing. It's just me and a couple of friends helping out. So I definitely dig it. If you like it, thank you. You can subscribe. You can hear it on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud now. There's 3 different ways to hear it. So enough of the plug. With that being said, let's go into my conversation with Jake from Rocksoft. Jake Szufnarowski here on the house list with Peter Agoston. Recorded here in my living room. Check it out. This will probably be the period of time when I fade right into it.
Yeah, well, let's fade in, brother.
Right. Well, one thing I want to start with, because there's so much shit that I would love to talk to you about, especially because you don't live in New York anymore, right?
I don't. I live in London, England.
So that's just for the last year or two?
2 years, 2 months, and 7 days.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I guess that would be 2 years, 2 months, and 1 week.
And you don't have that. You lived on Houston Street for a long time, though, right?
I did, yeah.
Is that place is completely...
No, completely gone. Well, no, it's not gone. I mean, but it wasn't mine, so, I was just renting it.
Right.
So it's still there, but it just got sold recently. I lived in the Red Square building, which got sold to some huge corporate interest, and they took down the statue of Stalin.
Right,
and,
that was on the roof, right?
Or Lenin. Lenin, probably. Right. It wasn't Stalin, right? They wouldn't put Stalin on the roof there. But they took down the statue of Lenin and put it somewhere else, and, of course, they're saying, that whoever this new conglomerate is going to, jack up the rents considerably. But, of course, that's... What else would you do?
That's kind of what's
once they removed the statue of Lenin, I think they're taking out that. I think that was a big statement, right? It's not going to be a communist fucking socialist building anymore.
Right, but so that place though was your base for quite a while, right? You lived in that building from when I think first met you, because I feel like I even went there once to pick up flyers or something like that.
Maybe I was there for a long time. I don't remember how year, 5, 7 years, something like that.
Okay. So then what? So now,
moving to London was like a gradual process that I didn't see happening until it had already happened. My lease was up on my apartment on September 1st, 2 years ago, and I went to visit England, and I had toured over there a lot with Tragedy, my heavy metal tribute to the Bee Gees, and so I just went over for the summer to go I wanted to go to the Sonosphere Festival, and then Black Sabbath was playing in Hyde Park, and Dolly Parton was playing, and Jack White was playing, and it was one of those weeks I was like, there's a gig every night. All right, I'm just going to go to London. Right. And I wanted to see the Brooklyn Bowl in London. Government Mule was playing, featuring Warren Haynes, ex-guitar player from the Allman Brothers.
Right. When did that open? You know?
The Brooklyn Bowl in London?
Yeah.
2.5 years ago. Okay. So it had been open 6 months at that time. And funny enough, Warren Haynes from Government Mule lived in the Red Square building as well. So I was like, oh, this will be funny. I'll go see him at the Brooklyn Bowl, which my friend owned, because the guy who owns it, Peter Shapiro, used to own Wetlands, which is where I got my first booking job. And so I just went over. I was like, oh, I'll go see Government Mule, went to the bowl, not snuck, but got brought backstage by the manager and surprised Warren. And he was like, what do you, He was like, why are you here? You're my neighbor. We see each other in the elevator all the time. And then I just called Peter, the owner, and I was like, yo, you did a great job with the Brooklyn Bowl London. It's fantastic. The staff is great. The vibe is great. It feels and looks just like the Brooklyn Bowl in New York. But I noticed there's not a lot of shows on the calendars that have been slow going. And he was like, we've been trying to book it from New York. We need someone in London.
Oh, wow.
He's like, you know a lot of people in London. You want to move to London. And I was like, yeah, well, I'll go for a few months, because it was I was like, when the concert cruise series is over, which is one of my main things that I do, it's in the summertime, I was like, come September 1st, I'll go for the rest of the year. And I was like, oh, my lease is up, so I'll just put my shit in storage, go to London for the end of the year, and then I'll figure out what's up after the new year. And then after the new year, Peter was like, hey, you're doing a great job over there. You want to stay a little while longer? I was like, yeah, I'll stay a few more months. And then next thing I knew, I was like, oh, I guess I live in London. And they got me a work visa. And I was like, wow, neat. I'm in London, and now I'm still there, which I didn't think I'd live there that long.
Right. It's Brooklyn Bowl, because I've never been to the one in London, but is that in the O2 Arena or something? It is a larger thing.
It's in the O2 Arena complex. So it's not inside the O2 Arena. You have separate tickets. At the O2,
sure.
The O2 complex, they have the arena, they have the Indigo Theater, which holds 3,000 people. We have a huge movie theater, bunch of restaurants, and the Brooklyn Bowl.
Oh, cool.
It's kind of like a LA Live type of thing.
Right.
A planned entertainment complex.
So, and I didn't really mean to jump right into the talent buying stuff, but I do, now that you're talking about it, I am pretty interested just to know,
what else is there to talk about? I'm a talent buyer. More technically, a talent renter. Because if I was buying talent, it would be more like slavery. And you can't get away with those kinds of deals anymore. You used to, right? Back in the 50s and 60s, put on concert tours.
Right.
And get people to work basically for free or for the keys to a Cadillac, as the legend has it.
Right. Yeah, renting is a lot more...
It's not even leasing, because you don't get multiple uses, right?
You get them for
the night.
90 minutes.
Yeah,
you know,
for whatever. Yeah, like you rent a car, right? Like zip carring.
So how do you approach are you dealing with primarily British and European agents then too, right? Or how many are you dealing with American agents?
I hope the listeners out there in podcast land are interested in the business side of music, because as far as the promotion game goes, it's very different in the UK than it is in America. And in promoters in America, that's how I kind of have made my living over the past 15 years. As an independent promoter, there's not a lot of independent promoters, especially not at the smaller level, like at the club level. But over there, every act has a promoter. So the venues don't typically book themselves. Typically, the booker in London is a calendar holder, and the promoters get involved with bands from the very low level. If a band can sell 100 tickets, there's promoters, like little promoter sharks swimming in the water trying to bite up the little 100-ticket fish. And then they own them. It's very bizarre. So it is kind of like talent buying, because once a promoter decides that he's your promoter and you decide that he's your promoter, you stick with that promoter all the way up to arenas, and they come with a plan. They're like, okay, this is your band. When you get to this level, these are the rooms you should play, and then we'll move to the next level. And as you know, most bands don't make it that far, so then they just die on the vine. But if your band stays successful, you're tied to that promoter, which to me is really weird, because I've asked a lot of people, like, what if you don't like the promoter? You don't think they're doing a good job? Well, you tell them they're not doing a good job, and you get them to do a good job.
Okay.
Like that does, like, usually when I find people who aren't doing good jobs and I tell them that, it leads to a big strife, not okay, we'll do a good job.
I wonder how much of a cultural thing that is, too, because that sounds, too, like Japan. Like, I've been to Japan several times on tour, and it's usually there's one designated promoter for whatever artist I might be with, and that's who's been working with them for quite a while, for years, you know, and it's very territorial too, you know.
It's very territorial in England, to the point where I've pissed off a lot of people, but not on purpose. I went over there, I met a lot of the promoters. A lot of them come to the bowl because it's at the O2, so if they're going to a gig at the O2, they come to the bowl beforehand, afterwards. We do after parties for most of the big rock shows that happen. We'll do their after party at the bowl, because it's right there.
Do you act as the talent buyer for that specifically?
Yeah, but that's like just an after party, so it's basically we just say, hey, we'll close the venue off from you from 11 p.m. onwards, and just come on in and have a great time, and bring all your guests and drink. So there's no like talent buying, but I'm like the liaison to make that happen. So all of the industry has come in, but the O2 isn't like necessarily the coolest place. It's not known as being a really cool place because it's the big corporate entertainment complex. So it's been hard to get some of these promoters to bring their acts in, because they're like, oh, we want to play in Shoreditch or Camden, which is like the East Village, or Williamsburg.
Right. So Brooklyn Bowl there, what's the cap at the Brooklyn Bowl in London?
900.
So what then, what are other
venues? Are the Electric Ballroom, Village Underground, Coco, and Scala. Those are kind of
Coco and Scala,
the big ones where bands will want to play. So I had a lot of promoters telling me, like, well, I work with this band and that band and that band. It's like, great, okay, let's bring them in. And then I'd be like, okay, you got any plans? You just stay in touch with these guys. And then you hear like, oh, no, nothing. And then the band you're asking them about, a month later, they pop up with a show at Coco. And it's like, how come you didn't tell me about that? You didn't ask for holds. You didn't give us a chance to bid on it. They're like, well, Electric Ballroom's the place for them. And I learned pretty quickly that these guys don't want to get out of their comfort zone. They're just like, it's not about money. It's not about the deal. I offered really favorable terms to try to get people in.
Sure.
So then I just was like, okay. At first, my job was just to try to get promoters in and bring their bands. And I was like, well, that's the easy way, because then they take the risk. You just have them rent or hire the venue, as they call it there. So you have them hire the venue. You know what money you're getting to cover your staffing, and then you get the bar spend on top of that. But what happened was they weren't doing this, so I started making offers, as you would in America, and then very quickly the phone started ringing, especially when I booked this band called Brand New, who's really big over there. They'll sell like 10,000 tickets. In fact, their next show after the bowl, like the bowl show, sold out immediately because they had a new album coming out, and it was their underplay. And then they played Alexandra Palace, which is 10,000 capacity.
Wow.
And I got a phone call from the promoter, who was the promoter of Brand New. He said, what the fuck do you think you're doing, making an offer on my band? And I was like, I'm just making offers on bands, man. I don't know what to tell you. Their booking agent was here, said he loved the room. I said, what do you have coming up? He said, Brand New. I said, I'd love to do it. And I sent him an offer. He's like, you paid them way too much money. I'm like, well, no, I didn't, because the show's going to sell out. And he's like, well, they're worth more than that. What he meant was you paid them more than I could pay them to play in your room with your rental fee. And I was like, well, that's not my problem. He's like, I'll never do a show with you again. And I was like, well, you haven't done one with me anyway. In fact, you've never asked me for a hold. So if I'm losing for a relationship with you, I don't care. And then I realized, like, oh, I got to start doing a lot more of that. So I did, and then I ruffled a lot more feathers. But what that did, it was kind of like exactly what I planned, was that more and more promoters are coming to me being like, this guy's not just going to sit on his ass. He's going to make competing offers, and I'm offering them more than they would offer because these promoters put in a huge fucking profit for themselves.
I'm sure.
So where I'm working for the venue, so I don't have to have all that extra overhead that the promoter brings in. So I'm like, all right, well, we would charge a promoter X to hire the venue, and they've got to spend some more on marketing, so I can get away with a little more in the deal for the band. But it turns out what I'm offering these bands is way more than that promoter would, even for a sold-out show. So I scared a lot of people pretty quickly, and now a lot of promoters are coming to me being like, hey, I'd like to put so-and-so in your room, and I'd like to put so-and-so. And I'm like, all right, yeah, dominoes are kind of falling.
Right, so they're kind of adjusting more to that
They're kind of
model
adjusting
here.
to the way we do it, but because the British way is very, like, I don't know, they're not into moving fast and disrupting things. So they're very like, this is the way we do it. And I think I changed that because I was like, yo, Hurricane Jake's in town. I'm going to fucking knock walls down. I don't care because I'm not here to play your game. I'm here to fill my room for my boss. Like, he paid me to come over here and fill this room, and that's what I'm doing.
Right. It's pretty black and white,
Exactly. It's like, I'm going to fucking... Bands need to play here, and I'm going to offer bands money to play here. And if you want your bands to play here, fucking let's boogie, dude.
Right. So are the agents, like, beholden to the promoters there or something? Or, like...
That's funny, because the promoters feel like that's their band. But then I've had a few where I've sent the offer to the agent, they've confirmed it, and then the promoter has had a fucking shit fit, and then the agent said, such and such promoter's really pissed, like, would you mind co-promoting this show with him? And I'm like, yeah, that's fine, because I don't want to, I'm not trying to eat the promoter's lunch and keep them out of business. What I'm trying to do is get them to work in our room. So I've co-promoted a bunch, but it's funny to mention that, like, that a lot of these agents haven't been like, can you co-promote this date with so-and-so before they ask me for the offer, because I think they realize if they do that, like, then the promoter's going to come in and tell me, we got to build in all this profit and we can't over offer them. So they've come after the fact, and then those promoters have been like, well, you paid the band way too much. And I'm like, well, still I didn't, because it's a sold out show and I know how to do math. So we're making plenty. Your half of what we're making probably isn't what you're used to because you way underpaid them. So I'm not overpaying. It's you've been underpaying, and now you've been outed for underpaying, basically.
You must be the only American talent buyer type person around there, right? Are there?
No, there's a guy named Glenn Max, who was the talent buyer at the Knitting Factory on Leonard Street before I was.
Wow.
So Glenn had been there for literally ever. I don't know how long that is, actually, because infinity can't be measured, right? But he was there, and he basically handed the job to Matt McDonald, who went on to take over CMJ, and then Matt left right as Wetlands was closing, and I got that job. So me and Glenn share that lineage, but Glenn's been over there for a long time. I think since like 2000. He left the Knitting Factory to go. He has his own company now. Village Underground is one of his venues, but he's become like a mover and shaker in his own right. He started over at Royal Festival Hall on the South Bank. And he's quite a hustler. He's got his finger in a lot of different pies. Interesting.
That's so interesting.
But he's the only other American I know.
And he's
a buyer or a booker.
And out of all the promoter, talent buyer guys, it's another Knitting Factory kind of alum.
Right? Michael Dorf scared us so badly we had to leave the continent.
Yeah, and that's now I've with some of the conversations I've been having with this podcast. And I think a lot of where my experience, like really in the New York music industry too, really all kind of didn't start, but a lot of it stems from the Knitting Factory. I'd been doing a lot of stuff for a long time before the Knitting Factory, but working there was such a kind of impactful experience because I spent lots and lots of time there. But I came in as the talent buyer with, there was a couple other people there, Chantel, and for a short period, John Chavez too. And that's where I actually met you, was at the Knitting Factory. Mm-hmm. And I remember the very first time I met you too was at a nooner, and you walked in there. It was like a noon meeting. They would have Shay and the general manager and stuff, the staff would have a noon meeting every day to go over the numbers, the bar ring, and all this shit, and what's coming up, the calendar. Now it all seems quite archaic and stuff, but to look back at that. But I remember the first time I saw you, because you came in and you had all dyed pink hair, and wasn't like any of the other people that were working there with me at the time, because you were an outside promoter at that time too. You were still putting dates in the calendar. But, and not to go long on that, but I do want to talk about your time there, and knowing that it's kind of connected to your sort of real start in the New York kind of live music, your history in New York City too. Mm-hmm. But I guess we couldn't really talk about the Knitting Factory without maybe just starting at the Wetlands too, which is obviously those are two kind of connected clubs.
Yeah, they're connected. They were both in Tribeca. They both opened in Tribeca when nobody wanted to be in Tribeca, right? When it was just like warehouses and garbage trucks, basically.
Right.
And both ended up getting priced out of Tribeca, within not too distant time frames of each other. Wetlands opened in '89, closed in 2001, and then Knitting Factory, I don't know when it opened in Tribeca. I would assume somewhere in the early '90s, because before that it had been on East Houston Street.
Right.
And then I think that ended up closing over there in 2005 or 6 or something. It closed in Tribeca and then moved out to Brooklyn after a while of trying to find a space. But yeah, Wetlands and Knitting Factory were kind of competitors. There were some other music spots down there. I remember New Music Cafe and the Canal Room, but those guys booked like Joker bands. Local bands who had to play for like a percentage of the people who got marked down for people who said they were there to see them. You know what I mean? They didn't book like many touring bands or have like guarantees. So it was Wetlands and Knitting Factory that had those, but we never really stepped on each other's vibes. Wetlands had its scene and Knitting Factory had its scene. Knitting Factory did a lot of indie rock, hip hop, and jazz at that time, and Wetlands did almost no indie rock and definitely no jazz, or very little.
But they definitely did hip hop, and they were known for that to a certain community.
Yeah, but hip hop was kind of okay down there because you had Wetlands doing hip hop, Knitting Factory doing hip hop, and SOBs doing hip hop.
Right.
And no one really stepped on each other because it was like there's enough hip hop to go around. None of them were hip hop clubs. I guess that's what it comes down to. Is no one was trying to do hip hop every night, so it wasn't like we're the best hip hop club. It was like whatever show was coming through town. If you put in a bid on it or you had a good relationship with the artist or the manager, that's what you'd get. So, and of course, nobody did what SOBs did, right? On the other nights of the week. When they weren't doing hip-hop, they were doing world music, and Wetlands and Knitting Factory weren't doing any of that. And then, so I got the job at Knitting Factory. Wetlands closed, and Shay came to see me, and he was like, would you like to, come book the Knitting Factory? Matt McDonald says you'd be great at it, and we need a booker. And I was like, well, this is fucking perfect timing, because I was having, a midlife crisis of sorts. I was 31. And at that point, that seemed like I was past the middle point of my life, the way I was treating myself. I was like, what am I going to do? Now I have to grow up and get a job. And then the Knitting Factory thing fell into my lap. And pretty soon I brought a lot of the Wetlands style bookings over to the Knitting Factory, and that made it so that I didn't last long at the Knit. Because
right. Well, they weren't ready for that. But what was the Wetlands style bookings that you
it was a lot of jam bands, funk bands, like white boy funk bands. It was pretty eclectic. I mean, everything from Lee Scratch Perry to Agnostic Front to Fish. Dave Matthews Band, Hootie and the Blowfish played their first gigs there, so there was that whole scene. But it also did a lot of kind of cutting edge rock, I guess you would say, or modern rock. Oasis and Pearl Jam had their first New York City shows there. It was
at Wetlands.
At Wetlands, yeah, it was a good major label showcase for them. It was very eclectic, but it didn't do indie rock or jazz, and nothing that was too quiet or contemplative. It was fun, upbeat music. So whether that was hardcore, death metal, reggae, jam band music, funk music, it was pretty much the same as what Brooklyn Bowl does nowadays. And people ask me what the Brooklyn Bowl booking policy is for either New York or London. I say it's upbeat party music. And
right.
That's a very wide range of music, but it's nothing quiet and contemplative, really.
Right. And the origins of the Knitting Factory are the complete opposite of that, where they were out jazz, free jazz, and folk experimental stuff, I guess. I don't know well enough the Knitting Factory booking of the Houston Street era, but did you ever go there at all, like when it was on Houston Street?
No, I never went to it at Houston Street, but what always marveled me and what I told Michael Dorff the first time I met him...
Michael Dorff was the original owner of the Knitting Factory.
Founder and owner of Knitting Factory on Houston Street, then he brought it over to Leonard Street. And I told him when I first met him, I was like, I don't know how you guys make any money, but I can kind of imagine that it's you invent all these festivals, and they'd have the Ambient Music Festival and all these sponsors attached to it, and the fucking Out There Downtown Jazz Festival with sponsors attached. And I was like, you can't make money from ticket sales and drink sales with the stuff you're programming, because literally nobody comes to this stuff. I know that. I don't even have to go to the Knitting Factory to know that fucking James Blood Ulmer's not going to do more than 104 tickets on Saturday night. And I was like, and with those 104 people, you're probably doing about a $600 bar. And I remember saying that to him, and he looked at me, he's like, how do you know that? He's like, that's close to the numbers we did last weekend for James Blood Ulmer. I was like, I just know. That's my job. It's my job to like know how many people are going to come see a certain act. And I was like, but I know when you have JVC Jazz Festival and you have their logo in your ad, like Michael Dorff was a genius at creating festivals literally out of nothing. Like, why is it a JVC Jazz Festival? Is it Jazz Heritage Week? No, it's just because he decided to book a bunch of jazz bands and convince this corporation to give him a ton of money.
Right, which he still does that to this very day here in New York.
Yeah, at City Winery. I mean, yeah, the guy's great at that. He's great.
Well, what's the big one? Dylan Fest, or what's the...
Oh, he does that shit at Carnegie Hall all the time. Every year he just picks another artist to honor. And he gets all these great people. Like, it gets David Byrne and Questlove to come and like, basically do a tribute night. Which to me is hilarious because he hated tribute bands. He yelled at me one time for booking a Guns N' Roses tribute band, and it was not long after 9/11. I was trying to fill the calendar with anything.
Right.
And he was like, "We don't book tribute bands here." And I was like, "All right, cool. Well, they did a $7,000 bar."
Right, which is Mr. Brownstone, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mr.
Which is like people, they're a really fun band,
right?
To see, But you broke that band in New York anyway, right? Like,
yeah, I did. Right. First booked him at the Knitting Factory only because I had an empty calendar to fill right after 9/11, and a bunch of bands had stopped touring.
Right.
Weren't going to come to New York, so we just lost a lot of dates on the calendar. So, to put it in perspective, I started my job at the Knitting Factory on September 17th, 2001. Wetlands was supposed to close on the 15th on a Saturday, and I was supposed to start at the Knitting Factory on the 17th, which is a Monday. 9/11 happened, closed Wetlands early, but I still showed up Monday morning for work. So I had all these cancellations, so I'm just trying to fill things. So I was like, you know what? People would probably come to see a Guns N' Roses tribute band. So I Googled trying to find one because I didn't know of one, and I found Mr. Brownstone, who were at like Connecticut College at the time and had just played
really?
They had just played a spring fling there, and like I had found that through Google and hit them up, and they thought it was a joke that someone was offering them a gig at the Knitting Factory.
Right.
They literally thought someone was playing a prank on them, and I had to get on the phone and be like, no, there's no prank. And they came and played, and we sold a lot of tickets, and it wasn't based on them. It was based on our marketing, and that I had identified and that there was a need in the market for a Guns N' Roses tribute band at that point for whatever reason. Like, I was like, I bet people will come for this. It just feels like the time's right. And it did. We sold like 400 tickets. And yeah, they had friends come, but not 400 of them. Maybe it was 100 of their friends might have come down from Connecticut College. And that kind of broke them in New York. And then they ended up playing... They played on Bonnaroo. They were first tribute band to play on Bonnaroo. They played the David Letterman show when they did Tribute Week, and they still play really big places. They still headline the Bowery Ballroom and Brooklyn Bowl to this day when they play their not so frequent shows.
What were some of the other things just during that tenure at Knitting Factory specific, just for a second, like the other shows that you were booking then?
I did a lot of full club events that we would book with like jam bands, and jam band is like a term for, I guess, like music that people that like Fish and the Grateful Dead go see.
Yeah, there's a connotation that comes with that. Also, really quickly, the Knitting Factory, for people that didn't go to the one that we're referring to on Leonard Street, it had 3 floors to it.
4 floors.
4 floors.
It's 3 venues because the main room had a balcony. So it was actually 4 floors.
Yes, there you go.
But I did a lot of full club events, we would call them, and we would have book bands in all the rooms, but you would typically, there were 3 different rooms for music, 4 for a little while, and they had the alternate, but then they changed that into one big room. But so it was like there was the main stage on the main floor, then one level down there was the tap bar, because named that way because it had a lot of beer taps, and then under that was the old office, which just used to be the office. So it was like 400 capacity, 200 capacity, and 100 capacity, so it was 700 throughout the club. So I would take either punk bands or funk bands or jam bands and book a bunch of them in all the rooms, and rather than charge $10 for this one and $8 for that one. We would
Right.
charge one ticket price, and people could circle throughout the venue as much as they wanted, which
Right.
turned out to be pretty successful because people would be like, oh, for $10 I can see 4 or 5 or 6 different bands in a night,
Right.
and I'm not confined to one room. So that was kind of a successful thing.
What's hilarious though is there's only one way to in and out of that building too. So everyone loading in, including the people that are like the ticket buyers, are all there's one entrance and one exit. It's the same door on
Yes.
Leonard Street.
Yeah, it was quite a logistical nightmare, that entire place.
But that added a lot of character to it.
It certainly did, and it made confuse the fuck out of everybody too, because they'd come in and people were constantly trying to go to the wrong spaces. I'm sure
Right.
you encountered a bunch of times. So I did a lot of that full club thing. I brought in punk and hardcore bands, which had pretty much never happened there. If it had happened, it was probably like a really avant-garde hardcore band or something that Glenn Max had booked. But I took a lot of the connections I just had from Wetlands and just moved them over, basically. A lot of bands I've been dealing with forever didn't have a place to play. And it was like, okay, Agnostic Front, well, there's no more Wetlands. You want to play the Knitting Factory? And they're like, yeah. And that led to a lot of crazy shit happening, as you can imagine.
No question. And Knitting Factory, I mean, just from my recollection too of working there, I mean, the New York hardcore scene really, Knitting Factory was an anchor room in New York City. I felt like during that time of the early to mid to late 2000s.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, that's pretty much 100% due to the fact that Wetlands closed, and I just came from Wetlands and just took all those contacts.
Right.
Because before that, I just think they literally hadn't been interested, and I don't even think that they would have thought it could have worked. And before I started booking those bands there, I wasn't sure it was going to work. I was just like, fuck, these are my bros. These are bands I've been booking for years, and this is where I work now. So this is where I'm going to ask them to play. But that led to a lot of issues with the neighbors, because punk and hardcore bands, especially when you allow re-entry, those fans are going to come in, watch their band, go outside, go to the deli, buy a bottle of beer, leave it on someone's stoop, piss on the sidewalk, not exactly good neighborly type of stuff.
Right. But there's some incredible groups. I mean, AF, which you mentioned, but obviously Cro-Mags, who you have a long history with too. You must have done them at the Knitting Factory, right?
Yeah, actually the first kind of current incarnation of the Cro-Mags show was, they had done something called Cro-Mag Jam. And,
right. What was that? I remember that was on the calendar.
John Joseph playing all the Cro-Mag stuff with Mackie on drums, and I forget who the rest of the band was. I think it might have been the current lineup of Cro-Mags, which is Craig from Sick of It All and AJ from Leeway. But I remember I was like, John, let's do this, and I'm not going to call it Cro-Mag Jam. Let's just call it Cro-Mags. And he was like, no, I can't do that. We got beef with Harley because Harley was in the Cro-Mags. We can't call it Cro-Mags. I was like, who's going to stop us? Who owns the name Cro-Mags? Like, I don't know. I was like, well, fuck it. I'm going to put it in the newspaper as Cro-Mags. No, you can't do that because Harley will get upset. Well, yeah, but Harley's not going to come to the show because everyone in DMS hates him, and he's probably not going to show his face at one of your concerts, so let's just call it Cro-Mags. And John's like, yeah, okay, do that. And then we did it. It was called Cro-Mags, and then they played more and more shows just calling themselves Cro-Mags, and then got a lot of offers, and now they're the Cro-Mags, as far as anybody's really concerned. So yeah, we did that. We did Bouncing Souls. I remember we did 6 nights of the Bouncing Souls, which I've been trying to do for a long time. And
how did that go?
They told me I was crazy. It went great. All 6 nights sold out. Their 7th album was coming out called The Gold Record, but it was coming out on June 6th, 2006. So all these 6s lined up. So I was like, let's do 6 nights culminating in June 6th, 2006. Let's charge $16.66 per night. And then let's do a 6-night pass. And Shay, who was the GM, was like, you can't charge $16.66. It'll be a nightmare for the box office to give out change. And I was like, I hear where you're coming from, but all the shows are going to sell out in advance, so there won't be any need to give change. And if they don't sell out in advance, I will personally come with as many tickets as there are unsold. I'll put a fucking Ziploc baggie together with 34 cents in change in each one, and I'll just give it to you. So someone pays $17, you hand them the Ziploc baggie, no one has to count anything, and I don't need the 34 cents back.
Right. And you didn't end up having to do that anyway, right?
No, exactly, because all the shows sold out in advance, and that was really cool. That was one of my favorite nights there.
That's amazing.
We had a Veil played, and I remember I jumped off the balcony twice during that show into the mosh pit, and then Paulo Suarez.
Yes, Paulo Suarez, who was also a booker at the Knitting Factory, talent buyer at the Knitting Factory.
Yeah, he came over to my desk on the Monday morning after that show and was like, yo, so I heard someone jumped off the balcony at the Avail show on Sunday, and I was just laughing to myself, really? I didn't see that. Because he was saying it as if it might become a problem with the managers or Michael Dorff, and I was like, yeah, that was me.
You did.
We had probably the most memorable show, maybe that I've ever booked. One of was the Locust.
Right. The San Diego band, the Locusts, right?
San Diego band, the Locusts, who dressed like locusts and played like 1 minute blasts of fucking death metal hardcore. A guy died during their show. Well, I'm laughing, but it's not funny.
No.
But he died on the dance floor. We thought he had passed out, and security picked him up and brought him outside, and he was dead as a doornail. And they called an ambulance, and they put him in the ambulance. And his brother was there, and his brother was freaked out. But his brother was saying he had a heart condition. And then, a week later, we got a phone call from the parents who explained, not to me, but to a manager that, who was working, basically said, you guys didn't do anything wrong. My son had a heart condition. He could have died at any time. It was arrhythmia or something, something like that. Obviously I'm not a doctor, but whatever it was something in his heart where he could have gone at any time, and his mother wanted to tell us that the Locust was one of his favorite bands, so if it was going to happen, that was the time to happen, and for us not to feel badly about it.
Wow.
And I remember settling with the band that night, and they're like, how'd everything go? Because there was no disruption on the dance floor. They just thought someone had passed out, so the band never stopped playing, never even noticed. And I was like, everything was great. Here's your money. The show was sold out, so, counting off the money, 100, 200, 300, whatever. I'm like, all that's fine. The only issue we had is that someone died during your show.
Oh my God.
And the dude was like, what? And I explained to him what happened, and he was, of course, freaked out, as you would be. So that was pretty memorable.
Someone died at one of my shows at the Knitting Factory as well.
Get out of here.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that it wasn't someone that was a ticket buying customer that came for the show. It just was the only show that night. It was in the main space. It was a hip hop show. I'm not going to say what it was.
Dead Briz?
But it wasn't. No, it wasn't. But it was someone that was there hanging out in the front bar. And they went into the bathroom and OD'd on the toilet in the bathroom and died. And had to be brought up on a stretcher by EMS. This happened right as the show was ending, and we had to close the doors to the main space and keep people inside. It was a hip hop show too, so
that's
people were
a
little disgruntled as this poor guy who was a friend of someone at the club, and just had an untimely miscalculation of some kind, I believe, and so. But getting back into, the Knitting Factory had a lot of ghosts. You can say that for sure.
Yes.
A couple other hardcore bands just that I kind of came familiar with during my time there that I wanted to just really quickly touch on was one you did, Subhumans, probably, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
How were those shows? Because I remember the club staff always being like, some of those hardcore shows hardcore and hip hop shows would be the ones that the staff complained about the most.
Yes, wanted to work the least.
It was Subhumans and Leftover Crack. Those were the two ones I always remember people talking so much shit about. And I was intrigued by both those bands, but obviously you booked them. You did Leftover Crack too, right?
Yeah, I did Leftover Crack. Yeah, a handful of times.
Were those shows that tough, or what was the? Is this a misconception, or what do you think?
Those shows, they weren't even tough. If you want to talk about tough guy stuff, like Agnostic Front, Cro-Mag, Sick of It All, that's the kind of shit where, if there was a fight, it was going to be a hard time for any security to handle it. The Leftover Crack and the Subhumans, I'm sorry to say, but what people didn't like about that band is that their fans smelled really bad. It's not even a joke. It was a crusty punk crowd, and these guys would show up, and they hadn't showered in 5 days, 7 days, and if you were doing security and patting someone down or even having to touch their hand to fucking give them a wrist stamp, it's not pleasant. I remember my earliest dealings with crust punk bands at Wetlands back in 94 when I was working the door, in the box office collecting money. Kids would roll up in fucking July to a show and pull money out of their sock, and it's sweaty and gross, and they're handing it to me, and I'd be like, I don't want to fucking touch this. You know what I mean? It's just it's just inhumane. It was just kind of disgusting. You know what I mean? People who don't have regular hygiene protocols. That's what people really didn't like about those bands. And with hardcore shows, it was those guys were always great until someone pissed somebody off or stepped on their shoe, or it would have been a respect issue, and then they wanted to fight. And a lot of these guys are looking for reasons to fight. And then hip hop is literally the exact same thing. Respect issues, stepping on someone's shoe.
Yeah. New York hip hop and New York hardcore have so much in common, yet they're kind of pretty two different worlds.
Very different. Yet Mobb Deep and Sick of It All share a logo, right?
Oh, no question about that.
But I think both thinks that they came first, but we're pretty obviously Sick of It All did, because they were around for 5-6 years before Mobb Deep.
Right.
But yeah, there's tons of parallels, and like who bridged those gaps better than the Beastie Boys, right? One band that I can think of that never played the Knitting Factory, but Beastie Boys started as a hardcore band,
right?
And
Very
became
true.
a hip hop group.
And I think a lot of that can also, I think promoters like yourself too did play a big role, not necessarily in putting those groups together, but that they played in the same room. So there was a certain...
because it took a crazy promoter who didn't care about his staff and their happiness to book both of those types of acts into the same club. Because Wetlands did that. Maybe Wetlands was the only club that regularly booked hardcore and hip hop shows, because Wetlands and CB's were kind of the two clubs in Manhattan in the 90s that booked that kind of shit.
Yeah, because CB's had some hip hop, just a little bit, right?
Very rarely, right. Yeah. And then Coney Island High did a fair amount of hardcore shows in the Continental. And Brownies would do more of the like smarter hardcore,
right?
Jawbreaker kind of stuff,
right? Yeah, a little more intellectualized hardcore.
Yeah, right. Intellectualized, smarter, like hardcore for people who can read. But yeah, I think Wetlands. I think because Wetlands existed more on the fringes of the neighborhood. It was down in Tribeca at a time when nobody cared about that. And it was a big club, 600 capacity, and there was a directive from the owner from when we started that it had to be open all the time, and the booking policy was open. And I didn't start booking hardcore at Wetlands, but I inherited it. Hardcore started I started there in '94, and there were already plenty of hardcore shows going on. And a guy named Chris Zahn was booking before me, and before him, Walter Durkatz, who's still around. And as far as I know, Walter booked the first hardcore shows there. So Wetlands was always it was open to any kind of music. Right. So it was hardcore, hip-hop, reggae, jam band. The owner, the guy who started Wetlands, Larry Bach, loved jam bands, but was like, if music's fun and people are going to come and pay and have a good time and they're excited, like it's exciting music, then book it. Like he didn't know hardcore from hip-hop. Literally probably wouldn't know the difference if you put it on for him. But when he saw hardcore crowds and hip-hop crowds in his room, he was like, this is amazing. This is fantastic. More of this. And it wasn't the money. Because at hardcore shows and at hip-hop shows, you put fucking pitchers of water out, and there wasn't a lot of spending at these. So it wasn't like, you do a jam band show, 600 people there would spend $12,000, $15,000 on a Saturday night. The next day you do an all-ages matinee for hardcore bands on a Sunday. There'd be 600 people, and you wouldn't ring $1,000 at the bar. True. So Larry was never like, book more hardcore because it makes money. He was like, and in fact, things would get broken. Like microphones would get broken, stands, all that kind of stuff. But he'd be like, book more of this, because he was always encouraging to book music that was active.
What was Larry? Now this is Larry, the owner and founder of the Wetlands. What was he like? Tell me about him.
He was a mad genius. I guess he was one of the smartest people I've ever met. And he was like a Bill Graham guy. Was he
from San Francisco?
Nope, he was from Connecticut, or he's from the city. He lived in Connecticut after he founded the club, but he was born and raised in Manhattan. But for whatever reason, he loved the Grateful Dead, and he wanted to open a music venue where everything was awesome. And he wanted customers to have a good time, and he wanted the bands, they wanted them to sound good. He wanted the lighting to be perfect in every little area of the club. He'd walk around adjusting the dimmers every night before we opened. He had this crazy, there was the mixing board that would mix the music that came off of the stage like any venue had, and then in a DJ booth he had a whole different mixing board that you would send the volume levels to everywhere around the club. So the bar speakers would be one level, the levels over by that old Volkswagen van would be another level.
Wow.
There were 4 different zones downstairs. Each bathroom had its own zone, and it would be my job or Chris Zahn's job to run around every night and make sure everything was adjusted. And it would change, when the band would finish, the DJ would come on, and then the levels would change. So you'd have to run around and make sure, the women's room can't be louder than the men's room. It's got to be the perfect volume everywhere in the club.
Wow.
And, Larry really cared about the customer experience, to the point where I was like, no one's going to notice this. And he'd be like, I don't give a fuck. I'm going to notice. The customers will notice. They'll notice in their subconscious, and they'll have less good of a time. So we have to make this experience perfect for them. And it's something I've carried with me ever since then. And I'm kind of a dick to people about that I work with to this day when they're like, it doesn't matter. It's like, yes, it matters. We're providing escapist entertainment for people. When they come to a nightclub, they're paying money to transport themselves into a different world than where they typically exist. Whether it's your house or your fucking job where, the lights are too harsh, not like in here. You have great lighting, by the way.
Thank you.
But when you pay your money to go into someplace, you're paying to go into like some sort of wonderland.
There's no doubt about it.
And that's why the biggest nightclubs in the world, like, they really get it. And that's why they install multi-million-dollar lighting systems. But so many rock clubs don't give a fuck. And one of the things that pisses me off, I'm sorry if I'm going off on a tangent, but like so many music venues you go into, like, they take zero pride in what gets played between the bands. And it's
I know.
What the fuck? Like, I came to a rock show. Like, why would you not care about what you're playing between the two bands? The bands, somebody curated these bands to be playing on the same bill together, and then you're going to take that 30 minutes between band time and play music that doesn't make any sense. And then they turn the lights way up. It's like, the band's changing over, put all the lights on. It's like, no, keep a steady, constant vibe throughout the whole thing, which is why Peter Shapiro, who bought Wetlands from Larry, he learned all those lessons from Larry as well, and he got them, and he's carried them over into the Brooklyn Bowl. When you go to the Brooklyn Bowl, there's DJs every night. The lighting doesn't change.
Right.
Like, it's a fucking great vibe when you walk in, and people are like, why do people like the Brooklyn Bowl so much? It's like, because the guy who runs it fucking cares about showing people a good time, not just having people come in and putting a band on stage.
Well, Brooklyn Bowl also enables the customer to, there's more than just a band playing. So you can stay in there for quite a while without leaving, and it's not just about the show. I mean, they have the food locked down, there's bowling, there's 2 different bars, and then this giant kind of space where there's
kind of common area when you first walk in.
Right.
That's like between the bowling and the food and the band, and that you're not necessarily like exposed to the band from a place where you can go have a kind of quiet conversation. There's all of that. And what that combines to do is give people what is, I think, for the first time since Wetlands closed and CB's, it's the first place where people feel comfortable to go see live music without knowing who's playing. You would never, if a friend came to town or you were looking for a good Friday night out, you wouldn't say to a potential date or girlfriend, let's go see some live music. Okay, where do you want to go? Bowery Ballroom. There's always someone good there. I love the Bowery Ballroom. They have great booking, but you really never know what you're going to get from one night to the next. Whereas Wetlands and CB's were both places where you'd be like, let's go to Wetlands tonight. On a Friday or Saturday night, we're pretty sure what we're going to get. We're going to get something like in that active, fun, exciting music. And CB's was the same. We were probably going to get some sort of hard rock, whether that was punk, hardcore, death metal, or just like good old-fashioned rock and roll. It was going to be like distorted guitar rock and roll. And that kind of disappeared. And that became a thing, I think. You could tie it to the way the internet kind of rose up and people could sample music. Like first it was with Real Player, then with YouTube and like streaming on people's websites. But that didn't really happen and become a thing until the mid-2000s. People think that was always there. So it used to be like if you could go to the Brownies website in 2003 and see the names of the bands who were playing and could read about them, but you couldn't hear them. So then as you could start listening to bands, you could decide, like, I don't want to get there for the opener. I heard 2 of their songs. I don't like them. And it made people, like, really picky about going out to a venue. But what Brooklyn Bowl did, I think, was make people comfortable. Like, hey, let's go to this venue. Let's get there early. If the opening band sucks, we'll go bowling or we'll go eat something or we'll get away from them. And what that's done is, like, made music, just like going out to see live music, a bit of a destination. And it's also put a lot of power in the hands of the booker. Because you can book a band based on quality and not just based on numbers. What we had to do a lot at the Knitting Factory was, how many tickets is this band going to sell? Because if they're not going to sell enough tickets, I can't book them. No matter how fucking good a band was, like, if you put them on stage, the only people who are going to see them are the people who paid specifically to come see that band.
Absolutely.
Whereas at Brooklyn Bowl, at least the one in Williamsburg, you can put pretty much anything you want on that stage on a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday night, and you're going to get between 200 and 400 people who are just showing up because Brooklyn Bowl is a cool place to go.
Right, true. So you met Peter Shapiro while you were still working at the Wetlands?
At Wetlands, yeah.
Right.
I started.
Was he bought it? How was it acquired? Like, I didn't realize that. What's the story?
He bought it from Larry, but Larry was fucking nuts in such a wonderful way that a lot of people came and tried to buy Wetlands when they heard Larry wanted to get out of it, when he wanted to sell it, and I was there for a lot of those phone calls because I worked as Larry's assistant, and phone would ring and such wants to talk to Larry, he's interested in buying the club, and Larry wouldn't talk to someone unless he was pretty sure he'd be interested in talking to them, so he'd make them go through buffers, and I was one of those buffers. And I'd be like, yo, this guy's interested, he wants you to send financials, and Larry'd be like, tell him to fuck off.
Right.
He wouldn't say those words, but tell him we're not interested. And I remember the first time that happened, I was like, what do you mean you're not interested? He's like, if he's the kind of guy who needs to see our books, he's not the kind of guy who should be buying this club, because you got to buy it because you love it. And I was like, who are you going to find who's going to buy a club like that? People, it's an investment, Jake. It's not an investment. Someone who loves music is going to come along. And eventually Peter came along and didn't really have the money to buy it from Larry, but they worked out some kind of payment plan where Peter was like, I'll give you X amount down and X amount a month.
Was he a promoter before that?
No, he was just another kid from Manhattan who had made a couple of movies, one of which is about the fans of the Grateful Dead.
Oh, cool.
Larry
That's
loved
right.
That.
That's right. I forgot about that.
It's called Road Trip, I believe. Yeah? Tie-dyed? No. Anyway, yeah, it was some sort of it was a Grateful Dead themed movie.
Right. So now, jumping ahead just a little, well, I don't want to jump ahead too far, but, it's Peter Shapiro and that kind of wetlands and the Knitting Factory. There's people that are involved with both of those that would then, open Brooklyn Bowl after the Knitting Factory, after a couple of years after the Knitting Factory closed.
Right.
And so, I mean, I know that's a part of your lineage, but you have a bunch of other shit that I want to talk about too. It's not just about the clubs, but...
Sure, we can stop boring anybody who never went to Wetlands
or the Knitting Factory, or maybe even Brooklyn Bowl, because it's very, obviously we're talking about New York City clubs too, and...
Are there other places?
That's a really good question. Well...
I've flown over some of them.
Yeah. Well, but you've toured as an artist too.
I have,
so
yes.
For a sec, I would love to talk about that too, because now you mentioned this earlier, but is this band still fully functioning? What tragedy?
They're still functioning. Fully would be, that's subjective.
But for a minute, you were
I'm not in the band anymore, so I don't know if I would call it fully functioning.
Right.
But they play almost as many gigs as they ever had. No, they're still a great band, and I joke about fully functioning. But yeah, they're fantastic. Me and a couple friends started the band in 2007 as a joke. It was called Tragedy, all metal tribute to the Bee Gees. I think we first called it the Tragedy, the #1 heavy metal tribute to the Bee Gees in the tri-state area. That was our official name, and we formed just to play a couple of gigs opening for Super Diamond at Irving Plaza, which was a Neil Diamond tribute. And we were like, let's just play these couple of gigs. And then, I guess because I was a promoter, before I knew it, I had gotten us a bunch more gigs, and then before we knew it, it was all done as a joke, much like the Bee Gees song "I Started a Joke." But there was this British guy named Ginger Wildheart from a band called the Wildhearts who was living in New York at the time, and he came to see us, and me and him were friends. He came to see us and was like, "This band is brilliant, you guys should put out an album." I was like, "We're never going to put out an album. What are you kidding me? Who would want to listen to that?" And he's like, "I would, and I have my own label in the UK, and if you put out an album, if you record an album, I'll release it in the UK, and you can come on tour supporting the Wildhearts." And they played to 3,000 people a night in the UK. So I was like, okay. And then I went to the band. I was like, "Guys, we're going to record an album." And they had the same reaction I did. "Why would we record an album?" And I told them. And then we ended up doing a tour of the UK just as a goof. Everything we ever did was a goof for the most part. And then we did that tour and got offered another tour, and then we ended up doing 7 tours of the UK while I was in the band. And they've done
really?
God knows how many more since I left. I left 5 years ago or something. 4 years ago this last month, yeah.
So you are fully integrated. Well, at one point in time, I'm not sure how this translates now that you're living in London, but you were the king of cover bands in New York as far as booking them, curating them. Because not only was it at the Knitting Factory and even at Wetlands and Brooklyn Bowl and stuff, but I mean, you were doing B.B. King's and Highline Ballroom. Not to jump back into the New York club thing again, too, but I mean,
that's okay.
But that's a network that your average person might not be fully understanding all of these cover bands. There's a lot of them,
There's a lot of them, and there always have been a lot of tribute bands. There's a difference between a tribute band and a cover band.
Right.
Cover band just plays songs by all different artists. Tribute band dresses up like them, only plays the music of one artist. It's a big distinction.
Right.
People might, most people are cover band, tribute band, whatever, but as far as the bands themselves, they take it very seriously. And I had always known about cover bands. I confused myself. I had always known about tribute bands, and I used to subscribe to the Aquarian Weekly, which is the New Jersey newspaper.
Right, yes.
So I'd always see what bands were playing down at, like, fucking Crazy Jerk-Offs and like, Big Eddie's Surf Bar, or whatever these venues were out in New Jersey. So I'd always see, like, okay, they'd have a lot of cover bands, but then they'd have, like, Unchained, New Jersey's #1 premier Van Halen tribute, and then they'd have like 8 different original bands opening for them. And it was actually Mr. Brownstone inspired me to do this. I was out with one of the guys from BB King's one night, and he got a phone call that some band had canceled for like a few weeks later, and he was like, do you have anything that could fill a Saturday night? And I was like, let's book Mr. Brownstone. And he was like, I don't know if they're ready, if they can sell enough tickets at BB King's. And I was like, yo, let me put like a Motley Crue tribute band and a Van Halen tribute band with them, and we'll call it Tribute Wars, and we made a logo that looked like Star Wars. And as far as I know, no one had done anything like that, or certainly on no big scale, and we had like really good advertising money from BB, so we put that together, and I think it made up taglines about like, you know, the bill you wish you had been able to see back in the day or whatever. We sold 1,000 tickets to it on a few weeks' notice, and I was like, oh, we're onto something here. And I was like, yeah, why would you put a tribute band with 5 original hard rock bands that no one's ever heard of or wanted to see?
Right.
So I did what seems very simple, which is what a lot of like ideas that connect, I don't even want to say good ideas, but ideas that connect with people are typically ideas where everyone goes, why didn't I think of that? And it was just like, let's create bills, let's have AC/DC, Bon Jovi, and Motley Crue tribute bands all together. And I did that for a long time. I'm still doing it now, but for a while it was like total can't miss. And then it started to fade off because everyone started doing it. It happens at all the venues. Then people start comping those shows and giving them away. And I was very particular about the quality of the tribute band. I'd make sure I'd either go see them first or get good references because I didn't want these bands to be lousy.
Right, and you were using kind of, it's not like you had a stable of certain specific bands that you had played.
Yeah, when I found the good Motley Crue tribute band, it wasn't always the first Motley Crue tribute band I booked, but when I found the good one, who was Theater of Pain from Long Island during that era, I'd stick with them.
Right.
And people, I think, came to know the Tribute Wars name because I'd meet people over the years who've been like, oh, Rock Soft. They'd be like, oh, you do Tribute Wars. I love Tribute Wars. I'll come to any of them. They're always a fucking blast. And it's like, wow, okay, cool.
Right.
And now I forget where we're at. We're closing in on Tribute Wars 100.
No way.
And it's a name I just took to London and did the same thing.
How does it translate over there?
Same fucking way, man. It's like, it was crazy.
Are you doing are there more British bands to choose from?
There are, but like, yeah, there's a whole different slew of bands, but I did like Blur versus Oasis, and that didn't sell many tickets. But when I do the same type of lineups, those classic American bands, those are the ones that really sell, like Kiss and Guns N' Roses.
Right. Can you clarify something? Because I've always been mystified by the range of Led Zeppelin cover bands. So there's not cover bands, sorry, tribute band.
Yeah.
Now, because there's been a few, and I'm just trying to figure out which is which. Because I'm trying to keep up with this shit when I look at calendars and stuff. There's Get the Let Out. Yeah. There's Zoso, right? Yeah. There's Led Zeppelin 2.
Yeah, from Chicago.
And then there's Led Zeppelin, right? And then, was there another one? There might be.
Bustle in Your Hedgerow?
Yes, which I've seen that on. You might have done them, right?
Yes.
So break it down, just really quickly. We don't have to spend too much time on that. But
Get the Let Out, Zoso, and Led Zeppelin 2 are all typical, straight-up Led Zeppelin tribute bands. Get the Let Out and Zoso are both from the Northeast somewhere. I don't know exactly where. Like whether it be Long Island, Jersey, Boston, whatever. They're from the area, close enough that they can play it quite regularly. Led Zeppelin 2 is from Chicago and has some sort of like Chicago indie alt-rock heritage to it. Like a couple of the guys were in some bands of some renown of something. I think one of them might have been an Urge Overkill, but don't quote me. Something
right.
Guy, like that's their little thing. That's their different niche. Led Zeppelin is all women who play Led Zeppelin music and ostensibly are lesbians, though I don't think that's a qualifier you need to be in the band. They've also shifted personnel a lot. The guitar player from that band was Stephanie something or other. She's the Jimmy Page. That's her band. So the rest of the players kind of swap in and out. And then there's Bustle in Your Hedgerow, which is kind of like the jam band instrumental tribute to Led Zeppelin, where the organ player does all the vocal leads with his organ.
Led Zeppelin 2, I mean, that one has always stumped me how they could have come up with such an unimaginative name as Led Zeppelin 2.
You know, blame the Brits, because in America, all the tribute bands have come up with, they're named after songs,
right,
for the most part. even though Get the Lead Out and So are not. Bustle in Your Hedgerow is a lyric, but a lot of mostly they're named after songs or album titles of the original band. Whereas in the UK, it's always like Oasis 2 or Blurred. They take the bootleg Beatles. They just use the full-on name of the band and add another word or something. So I think that's what Led Zeppelin 2 did.
Right.
Though, is Led Zeppelin 2? I think it's just called Led Zeppelin the number 2, right? But it should be TOO. That would have the Brits would do it TOO.
Right.
That's
it is just the number 2. That's for sure.
Which is kind of funny, like the sequel, but that's pretty ballsy. If you call yourself Led Zeppelin 2 TOO, that's saying like, we're also doing Led Zeppelin stuff. Whereas you say you're Led Zeppelin 2, the number 2, as if like the fucking second summer later I'm back, like The Empire Strikes Back. You better be damn good.
I'm saying, I would think so. I've never seen them before, so I don't want to cast any judgment on any of those bands, especially Led Zeppelin 2. And how are we doing on time?
Fine.
Yeah? Okay,
Where else do I gotta go, Peter?
Right.
You're making me so comfortable here, I could stay all night. You could chain me to the radiator for all I care.
Oh, yeah.
Leave me a dish of water.
I do want to talk a little bit about Rocks Off. There are some specific stories of yours that I really want to be able to allow you to expand on.
Okay.
But just Rocks Off as a whole, because basically, I think people in the tri-state and New York City in particular, and I would think anyone that's ever been to your shows, where regardless of where they're from, can identify with that brand because it's a very specific style of production, of curation of shows. It's a show promotion company that was sort of birthed out of your time as a talent buyer, formerly in clubs, right?
Yeah, when I quit the Knitting Factory. I quit the Knitting Factory because I got yelled at by Michael Dorf too many times for booking music that he didn't feel fit within like the Knitting Factory brand. Right. But he was like, I want you to keep booking shows here. I just need a talent buyer who won't hang up on jazz musicians who sell 14 tickets, which is what I would do. I wouldn't hang up on them, but I'd be like, try to, as politely as possible, be like, you can't play here anymore because you don't make at the club any money, and my job was to make the club money. So Michael got 100 too many phone calls from his old jazz friends who were like, your new booker won't give us the time of day.
Right.
So Michael was like, he stressed me out about it to the point where I quit, and he was like, okay, well, you're quitting, but can you still book shows here? So I just continued to book shows at the Knit, but just wouldn't come into the office. And then Paulo Suarez took over. And then before I knew it, I was running out of dates. So then I would call other clubs because I'd have a lot of bands who would call me to want to play shows, and I'd be like, oh, you're coming through town and you can only play this weekend? Well, then it's already booked. So I started booking shows at like CB's and Knitting Mercury Lounge. And then I decided I needed a name because I was making posters. And I was like, well, I see posters that say so-and-so presents.
Sure.
So then I just came up with the name Rocks Off, which is the first song on the Stones' Exile on Main Street album.
Right.
And it's a euphemism for an orgasm. And I'm a huge, huge fan of orgasms. One of the only things I like more than rock and roll are orgasms.
They're good. Yeah, I'm it's up on my top of my list.
They're great.
As well.
There's a lot of different ways to get them. You can get them from yourself. You can get them from other people. You can sit on your hand until you get pins and needles through it, right? And then they call it the stranger. As my friend Mishka Shubali, who used to be a manager at the Knitting Factory, said, there's the reverse stranger where you sit on your dick until it gets pins and needles, and then you jerk it off, and it feels like you're jerking somebody else off.
Wow, that one I've not heard that one.
Yeah.
It's also Kid Rock lyric.
It is. It is.
You met Kid Rock, right?
I did, and that lyric sealed the deal for us to have a really fun night together.
Was he cool?
Mad cool. Mad cool.
It was just like hanging out, like just like a party vibe.
I was hanging out at some party. My friend...
It wasn't just any party, though, right?
Right. Okay, you're leading me into this whole story. So...
I didn't want to go there right away, but this is
right.
It's a great story. No, we all want to talk about it, though.
Okay, well, Peter Shapiro had produced a movie called U2 3D that was a 3D IMAX concert film of U2 performing live. They filmed it in South America.
Wow.
And this is like a testament to Peter. He fucking talked U2 into this. They were like, have you ever produced a film before? And he was like, yeah, I did this Grateful Dead documentary that the band didn't allow us any access to, so he ended up filming it in the parking lot.
Right.
And they were like, cool, sounds good. However he fucking made it happen, he made it happen. So... the premiere was in Cannes, at the Cannes Film Festival, and about a week before the festival, his wife was supposed to be his date, and their premiere was at the Palais Theater on the Saturday night. It was the biggest of big deals.
That's huge.
Yeah, and So he invited me to come on his date but like, of course, you couldn't find a fucking plane ticket to Cannes on a week's notice.
No.
So I flew to Milan, rented a motorcycle, and got to Cannes like just in time to basically make it to the pre-party for the premiere. Right. And like, we had this little party beforehand in like a tent, and then everyone got ready to like walk the red carpet, and I got to do that even though no one took my picture, but like the Peter and the band and everybody walked the red carpet, and the band walked the red carpet. When they got to the stairs of the front steps of the Palais, they walked up to the top of the steps, and then their roadies pushed the gear out from behind these baffles, and U2 played a surprise concert on the steps of the Palais. With like thousands of fans who were just like lined up to see the band walk the red carpet. That was the deal. So it was like completely surreal and intense. We're like, what's going on? And then like we went in for the film, the screening, and there was like some prince that they introduced, or princess. I don't know. It's all a blur. Like, as far as I'm concerned, it was like Prince Albert of Monaco, but God knows who it was.
Yeah.
So then afterwards we went to this after party, and it was like super private after party, and there were all these people trying to get in, and we walked in, and U2 was on one side of the room, and I saw Kid Rock sitting on a couch on the other side of the room. And I just said to Peter, he knew Kid Rock, so I was like, just introduce me to Kid Rock, and I won't fucking bother you for the rest of the night. Right. So he's like, yo, Bob, this is my friend Jake. He used to book Wetlands for me, blah, blah, blah. So I sat down with him.
Called him Bob?
Like, called him Bob. So he sat down, oh, Bob, I'm Jake. And then we talked for maybe like 2 hours. We're just shooting the shit. And he was with some supermodel and named Mae Anderson, who they were dating at the time. I'd never heard of her before. But there were like some other various celebrities around and stuff. And we were just sitting on the couch talking like two buds. And I never mentioned that I was a Kid Rock fan. And then after a while, he asked me what I did. And I was like, I have a concert promotion company. He's like, what's it called? And I said, it's called Rocks Off. And he said, like the Stones song. And I was like, yeah, kind of like the Stones song. But I said, also like that line, I got to get my rocks off because my Wranglers won't fit unless my cock's soft, which was a line from his first album called The Polyfuse Method, with very few people had ever heard, because it came out on an indie label and never got reissued. And he was like, just looked at me, he's like, what the fuck? You know The Polyfuse Method? How do you know The Polyfuse Method? I was like, I'm not going to lie, dude, I'm a huge Kid Rock fan. And I think he took that in a cool way, because I wasn't just jocking him for 2 hours. We were just like talking like two fucking guys who didn't know each other.
Well, the early Kid Rock shit was like real kind of, he was going for that classic hip hop
type shit. Yeah, he was going for that 80s hip hop vibe. Right. So he just put his arm around me. He's like, me and you are going to hang out all night. And then like before I knew it, he was like, you want to do some cocaine? And I was like, yeah, of course I do. And like then we ended up going back to his yacht and stayed up all night. There's a great picture that he took of me and Shapiro like naked in his hot tub. The picture of me and Jessica Simpson, and she's in a bathrobe. She had just been on his yacht when we got back to it. Like, wow. It was that kind of night. It was crazy.
And all it can, too.
All it can. And then
That's
I've run
amazing.
into him a bunch of times since then, Kid Rock. And like, he's always super gracious and remembers me. And then I have friends who run into him who like, oh, my friend Jake. Because I wrote this story about it that went kind of like viral on the internet. Like Thrillist published it. It was just like a blog post of mine, and then Thrillist republished it. And like, so many people have read it. I was like, I don't know how many people, but people I don't even know come up to me sometimes. Like, I read that story about you and Kid Rock. And I'm
it's
like,
an epic story. It's very well written, too. So if anyone that listens to this has the opportunity to read it, there's a lot more to the story than what you're saying right now, too.
I remember Josh Moore, who books the Music Hall of Williamsburg, read it. And there's some disgusting stuff in there because I stopped at basically a brothel, kind of strip club. But I was like, when I was writing it, I was like, should I include this part? And I was like, it's not honest if I don't, right? Because this happened. So it's really like, it's almost cringe-inducing to even think about. But I did it. So I was like, yeah, I put it in there. And then Josh Moore was like, does your mother have the internet? And I was like, why would you ask? And he's like, does she read your blog? And I was like, well, funny. She doesn't have the internet, but I print out all my blog posts and mail them to her. So yeah, she reads it. And the look on his face was like, wow.
That's hilarious.
And she does. Like, and you can't hide things.
Sometimes you just gotta let it all hang out, man. And you did that. Another thing that I don't know if this ever happened, but I remember during the kind of the Rocks Off, era of, especially when you were working on the boat and when your office was on a boat in the East River. I don't know if this happened, but was there a period of time when you were gonna book Ween at Madison Square Garden? Like, were you trying to book a headline? I know that this was right around the time that they quit, that they kind of put pause, but was there any truth to that?
I had looked into it and looked into the costs and thought about it, but I wasn't sure that it would really be a possibility. And obviously to this day, it's never happened. And even though they went away for a long time, Like, it was something I thought about and talked about a little, but what I really tried to do and came very close to doing was booking Ween on the Intrepid, which is the big aircraft carrier on the west side. And I saw, like, Robbie Knievel jumped over some fucking, like, I don't know, jumped over a fighter plane or something on the deck of the Intrepid on July 4th one year, and that made me think, like, oh man, they got all those people up there and cameras and equipment and had a launch. I was like, I wonder if you could do music here. So I called the Intrepid, and this took a lot of negotiation, and I shouldn't even be letting anyone in on this secret, but it was such a fucking nightmare.
What,
like,
just
dealing with the Intrepid people, because it's a museum and a foundation, and they're not trying to make money by renting out their space. So you can rent their space for a private party. It's right on their website. It says you can do this. But I was like, could I bring in a stage and a PA and all this? And I had to talk to them for a while, and then I had to submit the band I wanted to book on there and present, and they had to make sure they didn't have any objectionable lyrical content. So I think I had to send them an album. I think it was Chocolate and Cheese that I sent them, which, like, has a lot of double entendres, but not a lot of straight up like objectionable material. And I was hoping they wouldn't, like, listen closely enough, and the songs sound nice enough. So I finally got the okay of that, and I put all the budgeting together, and, like, to load in, like, you had to load in through a bomb elevator that was small. Wow. So, like, bringing a whole PA and stage was going to take literally a day and a half. So I had to book the place for the day before and that day, and the expenses were out of hand, but I pitched the band on it, and they were all for it, and they were psyched, and were ready to confirm, and it was going to be on Halloween, because that's, like, the big Ween weekend. And then, like, right before, like, we had confirmed in principle, but before we like had the official confirmation, and we're gonna like put tickets on sale and announce it and all that, the manager was like, hey, one of the guys asked me, is this outside? And I was like,
God, really?
Yeah, what do you mean, is it outside? It's on the deck of a fucking, battleship.
Aircraft carrier.
Like, of course it's outside. And he's like, oh, yeah, I don't think that's going to work. It's going to be really cold out. And I was like, well, yeah, there's a very good chance it'll be cold.
What time of year was that?
It was Halloween.
Oh, you're right.
So I was like, but we're going to put the tickets on sale in July. And it's going to be warm out then. Everyone's going to, like, probably buy the tickets in July. So I don't know that they'll think of it. And I was like, but there's a full bar. But I think the novelty of everybody being on an aircraft carrier for a Ween show was going to, like, be fine. He's like, yeah, it's not the fans we're worried about as so much. It's the band. The band doesn't want to be cold. And I'm like, yeah, we're going to have a huge lighting truss with fucking hundreds of par cans on it, which emit a lot of heat. They're not going to be. They're not going to be cold at all. And he's like, okay, let me call you back. And then he called back like an hour later. He's like, thanks for all your hard work. I'm putting this together, but done. Not going to happen. Zero chance of it happening. I was like,
that sucks, man.
What kind of fuckery is that? Plus, that was before they broke up. So that was when everyone in the band was on a lot of drugs, or at least the guy who ended up going to rehab.
Right.
The rest of them, I think, still act the way they used to, and not all of them were on drugs, but one guy in particular was on a lot of drugs, and now isn't on any, supposedly. So I don't know that he would have even noticed that it was cold outside, even had it been cold.
Right.
And I wish I could say, like, and then I remember that Halloween, it was actually 69 degrees out or whatever, but I don't remember what it was like that Halloween. I think I probably blocked it out. I hadn't even thought about this.
Yeah, that's amazing. I had no idea.
It makes me want to cry.
Well, I mean, hey, you got really close, and you never know now that they're kind of back in the swing of things. It could be worth revisiting. They could be. A moment of clarity could have happened somewhere along the line that playing.
You know how Ween says, if you're a Ween fan, you know about their expression of things being brown.
Right.
Like, that show was really brown, or that's a brown version of that song. And that just means, like, kind of really, like, grimy and out there and extra psychedelic or something. And when they came back, I tried to get them. They did 3 nights at the Terminal 5, and I was like, we should add a show at the Apollo Theater, because there's no venue browner than that. Which is maybe not politically correct to say, but, I'm saying that just because that's where James Brown put out his live album from, so that's what I'm talking about.
And it's an old theater, too. It does have some kind of grit to it, too, just as a building alone.
And they loved the idea up until the point of money came into play, because it's expensive to stage a show at the Apollo, which is why not a lot of shows happen there. And
have you confirmed any shows there?
I never have, no. Right. But for the rent and everything you have to pay, you have to charge a very high ticket, and they just weren't comfortable with the deal, which I wasn't comfortable. I was like, yeah, that's a really high ticket to get fans to pay. I think fans would have paid whatever, but as you know, most bands set their ticket prices not for really what the market can bear, which is why StubHub exists, right? Because if artists and managers price their tickets for what the public was willing to pay to get into a show, ticket prices would all be a lot higher. But they're more concerned with the perception of how it will look to the fans that they're asking for that much money for a ticket to see them. So they always underprice the tickets, and then secondary market works because people are like, oh, the ticket was a $25 face value, but there's plenty of people out there willing to pay $130, and all the tickets sell at $130, and everyone's like, it's the scalper's fault. It's the scalper's fault. It's not the scalper's fault. It's the fucking artist's fault for not setting the price the right way in the first place.
Do you think that we could get to a place where those shows would just be $100 instead of $35? Like,
I mean, it should be. Like, not that I want people to have to pay $100 for a ticket.
But would that mean that StubHub would just go up to $250 a ticket or something? Well,
then those tickets should probably be priced at $250, right? Like, look, rock and roll isn't egalitarian. It's not for everybody. Or, not rock and roll is for everybody, but, like, experiences aren't for everybody. And it sucks that we're in a culture now where, like, it's the 1% and the 99%, right? And the 1% are the only people that can afford this thing. But, like, what do I think are things worth it? Like, I asked someone recently if the Book of Mormon was worth it, like, or Hamilton, because they got ticket prices. I was like, yeah, you think it's worth it?
Because tickets were probably $200, $300, $400, right?
Yeah.
Or more, right?
But my friend said to me, she goes, Jake, nothing's worth it. When you think about it, like, what the fuck is worth it? Like, it's only worth what you want it to be worth. So it's like, do I really want to go to that show? If I do, I'll figure out how to do it. But you don't need a Pearl Jam ticket or Temple of the Dog who's playing Madison Square Garden tonight to make your life complete. Like, you can find your good experiences anywhere, and then you have to decide for yourself, like, is that something I find, like, worthwhile to put all this money into? And really, money is just a transference of time, right? Because you get paid for how hard you work, how many hours you work, how much time you put into your job gets reflected back towards you in money, and then you decide, like, how many of these monetary units am I willing to trade for anything, whether it's fucking, like, a box of cereal or an apartment or cocaine or whatever. And that's a concert ticket too. It's like, do I find that this is worth it to me?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic question, because even just looking at, I mean, Broadway is such an interesting example of that too, where those tickets are $500 or in that world, and they're playing for every night for 3, 4, 6 months or years, right? Like, yet it's this insane premium, and they sell out every single show,
Right, but then rock bands are told that they have to keep their ticket low, like, to put up some facade that they, like, care about the fans. And then what that leads to is a lot of artists scout their own tickets, right? Like, they buy their own tickets, they hold their tickets back, they sell them to people at a premium who they know are going to put them on secondary sites. Right. And it's like this whole game of, like, if every artist really cared that their tickets got into the hands of their fans and nobody else, then they'd make tickets non-transferable and they'd put your name on it, and, like, only 2 tickets per person.
Right.
But they just pretend to care when they don't really care. They just want the big guarantee. And that's why ticket service charges are so high, right? Like, these are all open secrets within the industry, but, like, the reason Ticketmaster has to charge so much money on their service charge is because they're kicking back a lot of that money to promoters, and promoters are giving the act a crazy guarantee because the manager demands a crazy guarantee, which is going to equal close to 100% of the ticket sales. And then the only way for the promoter to make money is to, like, kind of tack that extra fee on. Like, everyone thinks it's Ticketmaster's fault. That was never Ticketmaster's fault. When Ticketmaster started, like, not that I love Ticketmaster, like, I don't give a fuck about those guys, but when ticketing services started, their fees were low because they were just providing a service. But then it slowly became like, well, I'll sign with you instead of them if you pay me a big advance as a promoter, because I'll sell you a lot of tickets. And they're like, well, we could do that. We'd have to raise our fees. And everyone just passes it on to the consumer. And then Ticketmaster has just been the big evil empire that's, like, just shut up about it. Ticketmaster, if the CEO, if he had just come out in the get-go and been like, this is the reason everything's so expensive, this is because these artists and managers are greedy, then the public would have maybe had some understanding about that, but then people probably wouldn't have used his service. So I think they took the bad rap for the concert industry getting expensive and just sat there and took it because they were mad profitable.
Right. And I mean, the ticket buying, concert goers, I don't know if it's that they're oblivious to the greed that exists in that kind of deal structure, or if they're just totally ambivalent to it. Like, it's like, is there really a difference between, like, a $25 ticket and, like, a $150 ticket, and, like, there is for the guarantee of what that commission that the agent is going to make, obviously. And I think a lot of that might be dictated by that too, we could go pretty far into that whole.
Who got all this right though is Kid Rock, and nobody's followed this guy's example.
How so?
Kid Rock made a deal with Live Nation where the whole thing went all in, where parking and beer sales and concessions and everything went all in, and every ticket was $20 for a summer shed tour that he did. Shed tour meaning like places like PNC Bank Art Center, those big outdoor summer amphitheaters that Live Nation owns so many of. And Kid Rock said, I'll come play for a small guarantee versus a percentage of the sales of the entire show. So whether it's parking, fucking hot dogs, beer, soda, whatever, and the ticket sales.
So they work all that into the expenses.
Everything's into the deal, like into the expenses and the revenue share. And every seat's $20 except the first 10 or 15 rows or whatever that they fucking price through the roof. So everyone with a lot of money who wants to sit close has to pay a lot of money, and everyone else gets the $20 tickets. And Kid Rock, before he did this, he was selling 8,000 tickets at these sheds. And then the summer where he did that, he was selling 20,000, filling these things up. So he just made the whole pie a lot bigger. And then there was lots more for all these fat cats to munch on. And that was his way of combating extreme high ticket prices and scalpers, because no one's trying to scalp that $20 ticket for that much money, because there were so many of them to go around. So they might not have sold out all these places, but everyone could get in cheap. And then they got in cheap. They could come for $20, so then they spent more money on beer because they didn't spend $75 to get in. So they'd spend their money on beer. You spend more money on beer, you drink more beer, you're happier, you remember it better, you go home, you tweet more about it, you tell your fans what a great concert it was, whereas you go to see Don Henley or Sting for $172 and you can't even afford to park, so you have to fucking hitchhike through the parking lot to get there, and then you can't afford to buy a beer or what they would sell at a Don Henley or Sting concert, which is an overpriced glass of wine. You can't even afford that, so then it makes you sit there thinking like, wow, I can see Sting's Crow's Feet and all his new music isn't as good as it has been. Nobody saw Kid Rock's Crow's Feet, and nobody complained about his new songs that weren't so good, because while he was playing those new songs that weren't so good, they had extra money in their pocket to go buy more fucking beer.
Sure. Yeah, that's a brilliant point right there.
And I don't know why everybody doesn't do that. Why isn't the Whitesnake Def Leppard Heart Tour or whatever that's, I'm sure, coming to amphitheaters near you this summer, why isn't that tour $20 for all
those are the ones that would truly benefit from it too, where it's
hugely, yeah, like Coldplay doesn't need to do that, right? Or the Foo Fighters, because they can sell all the tickets they want at $186. But it's like those older ones, like, but the Live Nation kind of does that, where they go and like they buy the tour, and then it's like 2 for Ticket Tuesdays or whatever, or you show up at the amphitheater and it's like, tonight only at the box office you can get a 4-pack of these tickets for $40. But what that does is that punishes the ticket buyer who shows up and goes, oh, I already paid full price for these tickets, and now I'm finding that they offer them later at a discount. If you're going to offer discounted tickets, you got to do it at the beginning, before everybody.
Like when you put it on sale?
Yeah, exactly. Like so many times over the years, agents have been like, oh, can we do a 2-for-1 deal or something because the tickets are moving slowly? I'm like, no. If you do a 2-for-1 deal now, you teach people your band's not worth that much. Do the 2-for-1 deal like at the on sale. And they're like, well, no, those are the dollars we want to get in as high a level as we can at the beginning. And you're like, well, and then don't come to me later. Like,
right. Yeah, because you could create, if you, with a little bit of foresight, you could create that extra incentive by doing those type of things ahead of time. Because anytime you try to do it after the fact, you look like you don't have that value, and you're scrambling. And on a much smaller scale, as far as like bands that play smaller rooms, that's when their shows get canceled, out of their control. Like the talent buyer, the venue, or the GM rather, or the club is like, listen, they're not selling tickets. We're canceling this fucking show.
Right, it makes more economic sense for us to cancel the show, and then it makes everyone look bad, and it's just. It is bad. It's bad all around.
What would you say is like your biggest or like more ambitious show that you've put on as a promoter, like as a rock soft thing, not just something you created and did?
I guess the cruises that we do, those have been ambitious. We just finished our 16th year of cruises, which is shows on boats around New York Harbor, right, that go out for 3 hours at a time on a lot of different boats. And it was ambitious because everyone told me I was an idiot when I started doing it. And like, no one's going to want to come out on a boat. The rivers are too far from the center of the city where the clubs are. No one's going to want to walk all that distance. You got to charge more than twice the ticket price. And everyone had told me my tickets were too high. I was like, well, it includes a boat cruise. Right. Like, you could go to Circle Line. When we started doing this, we were charging $20 or $25 for a ticket to the show, and it included 3 hours on a boat. And Circle Line was charging $27.50 for a 90-minute cruise. So I'm like, for less than what you would pay for a 90-minute like sightseeing cruise. You get a 3-hour cruise with your favorite band on it. And all the managers and agents who told me it was a bad idea and no one would want to do it, well, they were all wrong, because most of the shows we did back then, and still to this day, for the most part, they sell out and they're popular and the fans have no problem. The fans see the value of, like, if your band plays for $10 or $12 or $15 in a club and we charge $25 for that same thing on a boat, like, the fans don't go, oh, why is this ticket so expensive? The fans go, that's fucking cool. I'm going to see my favorite band on a boat, a 3-hour boat ride, and get to see the Statue of Liberty and all this shit and go under the Brooklyn Bridge. Like, they're like, that's a fucking value. That's a tremendous value.
Yeah, and we've done a bunch of those shows, me and you, and they're always super fun. And, yeah, I mean, that's like...
And the artists thank you at the end. They're like, this has been so cool.
Right.
Like, very few times have I done a show in any land-based venue where the artist at the end of the night has been like, this place is fucking cool. I've been like, oh, cool, that was an awesome show. Just yet another show on my tour at another club. The club might be nicer or more charming in whatever way than the club the night before. But, like, a boat is really a different experience.
Yeah, for sure. What's Dick Dale like?
Wow.
Because you've done a bunch of... He played the boat. I know you've done a lot of shows with him, right? How many shows do you think you've done with him?
I don't know. Basically every show he's done... Literally every show he's done in New York City since 97. So that'll be like 19 years, but sometimes he's done multiple shows. So over 20 shows, yeah.
So for people that don't know, Dick Dale is like the king of like instrumental surf rock.
King of the surf guitar, as one of his songs goes. And he was one of the guys who invented the surf sound. I guess it was Dick Dale and the Ventures. And then he was like, surf music had kind of died a death in the 70s. It kind of went away. And through the 70s and 80s, it wasn't really around, other than like the Beach Boys and Kokomo and stuff. But that wasn't really surf rock. But it was in 94 when Pulp Fiction came out that Quentin Tarantino used Misery Lou, which is one of his songs that really catapulted him back into the spotlight.
Is he cool?
He's mad cool. He's so cool. That guy's fucking nuts, man. Him and I became friends, and then he invited me out to his compound. He's got this like compound in 29 Palms, California, which is out just by Joshua Tree. And he invited me out to his place to see him, and I went out there, and he's got a fucking landing strip for his private airplanes. He's got 2 airplane hangars. He's got Cessnas in them. He's got like 20 motorcycles. He's a fucking Rolls Royce that's just sitting there collecting dust, like Corvette, turbo Volkswagen Beetle, like all this shit. He had a gorgeous house that he had built that sits empty, and he took me out to see this gorgeous house, and I was like, boy, he lives in a ranch, like a single-story ranch, but he had built this house that looks like it's out of Architectural Digest or something, and I was like, why did you build this house? And he's like, Pulp Fiction came out, and all these magazines wanted to come and interview me, and I thought I should show off and show them, like, the king of the surf guitar lives in this gorgeous mansion, so I built this mansion. He's like, but I didn't feel right, so I've never actually slept in it. But I just use it here for interviews. And he likes to sleep on a mattress that's on the floor in his ranch. And he used to tell me all these stories about how, like, he's a black belt in karate, and he'd done this and that, and like karate with Elvis, and he found Jimi Hendrix playing bass for Little Richard, and I didn't believe a lot of what he told me because it seems like tall tales. But then he's like, I fly my own plane. I fly to and from tour dates. And I'm like, yeah, do you really? Then you go to his house and see he's got his own landing strip.
That's crazy.
And I'm like, yeah, obviously you do. But he used to tell me all these stories about his lions and tigers. And I was like, I don't. Nobody has lions and tigers, pet lions and tigers. He's like, yeah, my mansion in Newport Beach in the 60s, I used to have lions and tigers, and I'll tell you, this is how it works with a lion. You never turn your back on it. This is the way you approach it, a lion or a tiger. He was telling me all these stories about them, and I was like, what? And then one day I went out to visit him. He was like, oh, look what I found in an old fucking storage bin somewhere. And he had all these 8x10s of him and his lions and tigers.
Wow.
And you can Google Dick Dale lions and tigers, and they're all on the internet now. Google image search. But he's like wrestling with tigers in his backyard and feeding lions milk out of a saucer. And that's when it hit me. I was like, everything this guy's ever told me must have been true. Like, because I was just like, you're just exaggerating.
Right.
I was like, no, there's pictures of you playing with your pet lions and tigers.
Because I would have never, when I think of him and listen to his music, and I love his music, and he still tours quite a bit. You know?
Like crazy. He's 79 years old, and he hasn't stopped.
I just would...
He's also never had a drop of alcohol. He's mostly vegetarian, takes very good care of his body.
Right, because he's like a workhorse.
Still gets in fistfights to this day. I've become really close friends with his bandmates, his drummer and bass player. And 2 tours ago, when he was 77 years old, he got in a fist fight at a gas station because a guy disrespected his young, hot wife. I was like, Dick, what are you doing? You're getting in fights. He's like, nobody talks to my wife like that. And he looks at you, and you're like, Jesus. And then I fuck around with him, and I'll do this with him, and super crazy quick karate reactions. And I'm like, wow, he's like agile as a cat, even though he's 79 years old. The guy's a Mr. Stab. He's fucking nuts, but very smart and intensely interesting dude.
Cool. And then I did kind of want to talk about I might have maybe missed my opportunity to, but just growing up in Mass and your earliest years and stuff. But I don't know if there's a way. I don't know. There's not really a way to bridge that with the Juggalos and running and stuff. But we got a pretty good. I think what we've done up to this point is really great. So
cool.
Yeah,
I feel good about it.
Yeah, cool.
I don't know that we need to get into growing up. That could be a whole I could get way into that.
Cool.
Nothing really that much to say.
Okay.
I mean, there could be, but
yeah.
The less said, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Right. Cool. Well, another amazing story, and it's more than just a story, but for a few years in your life, you were definitely in the mix with the Juggalos and stuff. So I wanna, and I remember too. I remember the whole thing because there was some, there was some press around it too, and because it was around the time, it was the mid 2000s, right? Or late 2000s.
2010 or 11.
Okay.
Or something.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't think there wasn't really any press surrounding any of my involvement with the Juggalos, really.
Maybe it was more our mutual friends talking about, so Jake is because you do these party buses too through Rock Salt.
Yeah. So and there was something when I got deep into the Juggalo world, and then I ended up writing some stories about it that got shared around the internet a lot.
Right.
Wasn't so, I wouldn't say it was press. It wasn't press. It was just kind of my blog posts going sort of viral. But the Juggalos got a lot of press. At the Gathering of the Juggalos, 2009 or 10 or something like that, 8 or 9, when Tile Tequila showed up.
Yes, I remember that. That's not going to be for me. Hold on a sec. Sorry about that. That actually was for me. Just
I'm just going to text someone.
Yeah. Right. Now I can figure out a new way to come back into that question.
Okay.
So what was the first time you went to the Gathering of the Juggalos?
Well, I don't know, 2010, I think. I don't know. I'm not so good with years like that, but more of an explanation of why I went to the Gathering of the Juggalos.
Yeah, please.
They had gotten a lot of press for the year Tile Tequila showed up, and people were throwing rocks and bottles at Tile Tequila.
I remember.
And then the following year, so they got tons of press for that, and then Tom Green had been there that year and did this viral video where he went around and talked to Juggalos,
right.
And they were all fucked up on drugs. He did it in the middle of the night, and in fairness to Juggalos, you can you go to any music festival at 3:00 in the morning and start wandering in the campgrounds, you're going to find a lot of people fucked up on drugs,
of course,
who aren't making any sense. So that's what Tom Green did, and his video kind of poked a lot of fun at the Juggalos. So then the rest of pop culture just poked fun at the Juggalos.
Right.
It was these guys are fucking idiots, and they have that song Miracles and Magnets. How do they work?
Right. Yeah.
And so it's they're easy to make fun of. They're super fucking easy target, right? And
the
then
trailers too for the Gathering of the Juggalos was getting more and more attention.
Yeah, and it was you'd watch that stuff and you'd be like, these guys, are they for real? Or do they take themselves seriously? And it seemed like they did, which made it even easier to make fun of because they were so earnest. But so Insane Clown Posse was playing a show at the Gramercy Theater. They were playing the Bamboozle Festival at the Giant Stadium parking lot.
Right, which is in the Meadowlands or something like that, right?
Yeah, the Meadowlands parking lot. Right. And the night before the festival, was on Friday night, they did a show at the Gramercy Theater, and they wanted to do an after party. So I got a phone call from someone at Live Nation who runs the Gramercy and was like, Insane Clown Posse wants to do an after party. Do you know a place that'll hold 400 people that is all ages and is available this coming Friday? And this was a Monday or a Tuesday. And I was like, that place doesn't exist. And if for some reason it does exist, like an all ages place of that level, then it's already going to be booked from midnight to 4 a.m. And she's like, nah, can't you find somewhere that really want to do this party? They have a lot of money. And it dawned on me, I was like, oh, well, we have a boat on 23rd Street that's docked at the end of 23rd Street, East 23rd Street. And I was like, okay, we can do this, but it's X amount to rent the boat, and I need a security deposit because I've heard these people are animals, and I need the security deposit and the rental fee like overnighted to me as a cashier's check. Like, I'm not going to take anyone's word for it, but I got
fucking around.
No, I got to have all this money, and either they want to do it or they don't, because I don't care if I do it. So, like, this is what I need, and if the boat gets trashed, I need money, to take care of it. And fucking next day or the day after, like, I think we agreed that day. The next day they cut the check, and the day after it arrived. And I went to the show, and that was during a time where I had, like, pink and purple and orange dyed hair. And I remember I went to the ICP show, and I was walking around outside, and all these people were, like, these kids had waited all day so they could get close to the band. So they had, like, waited to line up at doors because it's a general admission show. And I was walking around looking at them, and I said to my friend, I was like, look at these people. They look like fucking retards. And he was like, Jake, they're looking at you thinking the exact same thing. And I'm like, oh, that's right, because look, I have all these, my hair's dyed these crazy colors. And I was like, wow, that's a good point, So we went into the show, and I didn't know much about them. I remembered when their first major label album came out, the Great Malenko. I had bought it because I heard Vincent Price did the opening monologue, and I loved Vincent Price. And I didn't really love the album, so I didn't give it much thought after that. And I just knew they had like become a kind of pop culture thing, but they were kind of like living off in their own world. And they did the show, and I fucking loved the show, and I got hit in the nuts with a bottle of Faygo that got launched off of the stage, and I came out of there drenched, and I was like, this is hilarious, this is awesome. And then I walked down 23rd Street with my friend towards the boat, and I realized like they were all walking with me, all these juggalos, and as I was approaching the boat, I was like, oh my God, what have I done? I've made a huge mistake, right? All these people are going to get on our boat. This can't end well. And then I got to the boat, and the owner was there, and he was like, hey, what's going on with this party tonight? This Italian guy from Queens. He's like, what kind of people are these you're bringing me? And I was like, oh, they're juggalos. They're fans of this band Insane Clown Posse. And he was like, Insane Clown Posse? Are Shaggy and Violent J going to be here? And I was like, what? And he's like, yo, I love that band. I hear them all the time on Howard Stern.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I was like, wow, they're going to be here. And then I was like, awesome. So if anything goes wrong, he's stoked to have them on here. He knows all about them, so he's not going to like freak out at me if something goes wrong. And then they all got on the boat, and we had a VIP area set up for Shaggy and Shaggy, Too Dope, and Violent J, who I'll refer to as Shaggy and Jay.
And they came to the thing.
Yeah, they came to the thing. They wanted to set it up, and I set up a VIP area for them, and I told them all about it. I'm like, okay, this is where you can go, and it's private. And they're like, there's nowhere private. Like, I don't want anywhere private. We want to mingle with our fans. That's why we're here. And I was like, really? You don't want a place to go by yourselves? And like, no, we're here to hang out with the Juggalos. And I was like, you never hear a band say that. Like, I don't want anywhere private. So then the whole night on the boat, I was wearing my Rocks Off hoodie, and Juggalo after Juggalo was coming up to me. First of all, they didn't cause any trouble. There was nothing wrong the whole night. They were smoking a lot of weed. That was it. But they were spending money at the bar, and all night they came up to me, and they were like, yo, you're from Rocks Off. This is your party, your boat. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, thank you so much. I just want to say thank you for having us on here. Most people don't like us. And I got all these variations of the same thing, which were basically like, everyone hates Juggalos. We're not bad people. Thank you for hosting us on this boat.
Right.
So I woke up the next morning, and I was like, who are these people, these Juggalos that everybody makes fun of, that thinks are such fucking, like, bad people? And woke up the next morning with a hell of a hangover, and, like, Googled Insane Clown Posse and read everything I could read. And then I went to the tattoo shop later that day and got a Hatchet Man tattoo. And I was like...
Next day?
Next day, yeah. I was like, why not? Well, I have a lot of tattoos, so it's not, like, that big of a deal for me to just get one on a whim.
Right.
But I went and did it, and I was like, woo, woo, I love this shit, right? And I listened to a lot of their music, and their music is like, you're a big hip-hop head.
Right.
I don't know if you've ever listened to any of their music, but it's not, like, there's a lot of it that's pretty good.
And they are actually, like, hip-hop, like, diehard fans and
big
stuff.
Big fans.
Right.
If you look at any lineup from any gathering, there's tons of awesome groups they have on there.
Definitely.
That they pay a lot of money to because they want their heroes to be there. I mean, the second year I went to the Gathering, they fucking put up the money for the first Ghetto Boys reunion in a long time with, like, the original three, Bushwick, Bill Scarface, and Willie D. Like, that guys hadn't performed together in a long time, and that was a big deal.
Yeah, and they also, to their note, they booked Above the Law, which is one of my favorite L.A. hip-hop groups. I love that group.
Compton.
And they brought them out, and it was just amazing. And I think they even put out Cold 187, one of his albums on their
psychopathic
label.
records.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So those dudes, I got love for those dudes for that for sure.
Yeah, they love hip hop and they live it, you know, and they literally put their money where their mouth is.
Right.
But I wanted to go to the Gathering, so I came up with this idea that I was like, well, it's hard to get to because it was like at that point it was held in Cave in Rock, Illinois, which was 3 hours from St. Louis Airport, 3 hours from Nashville Airport, and like 3 hours from Chicago or something. It was like 3 hours from any of these 3 airports, like
it's like
triangulated in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it's on the Ohio River, like a little like campground, right? Or
yeah,
like,
this little campground, literally in the middle of nowhere, and so I was like, wow, how can I get there? Well, I'll have to fly here, take an RV, do this, like rent a car, whatever. However I could figure out how to get there was going to cost me a lot of money. So we do these party buses where we charter these buses and take them to concerts around New York City as a way for like people who don't have cars to get there, because public transport doesn't really get you to PNC or Jones Beach. And even like some venues will go to where it does get you there, but people would prefer to spend a little more money to be in a private vehicle that's full of other people partying, and you can drink beer on the bus, and it's got a bathroom, and like we have a DJ and host, and like we make it a really fun time, and you can leave all your stuff on the bus. So it's like you really kind of bond with everyone on the way out there. Like you would never do that on a like Long Island Railroad train or whatever. So we had these buses, so I was like, I priced out what it would cost to take this bus all the way out to Illinois. And it was something like the Gathering was 5 days long, so I had to pay for the bus to drive all the way out there, and I had to pay for 2 drivers, and one had to like go out in advance because he had to get rest in a hotel because drivers can't drive for that long, and it was so the whole thing came out to like $10,000 or something like that. So I charged $300 a ticket for people who wanted round trip transportation to and from the festival, not really understanding that Juggalos don't have that much money, and they'll pile like 6 or 7 into a beat up fucking Honda Accord to get there. So we didn't sell that many tickets. We sold like 25 of them or something at $300, which if you do the math comes out to like $7,500. So yeah, I lost $2,500, $3,000, something like that doing this. But in the end, it wasn't that much more than it would have cost me to go out with a few friends and pay for their airfare and like rental car and stuff. Right. So it was like in the end, like financially, it wasn't that big of a disaster for me, especially if you know me and know that like I don't care that much about money. So like the money I have, I spend like willingly and some would say recklessly on whatever it is that's going to make me happy. So I was like, fuck it, who cares? You know what I mean? We sold enough tickets to like kind of come close to breaking even, so that's cool. And then we went there, and I just had the best fucking time, even though like it was kind of a nightmare. Like remember, our first stop, everyone was graffitiing this bathroom on like somewhere out in like central Jersey on Route 78. It was like one of those rest stops that was just a rest stop, like those ones on the highway that's not like a service station, just the rest stop. So everyone was writing graffiti and stuff, and I was like, guys, get back in. Then the next stop, we stopped at one of those service stations, and everybody was stealing from the service, like from the convenience store. And I was like, guys, this isn't cool. And then one guy lit a gas pump on fire, like held a lighter up to the gas pump, and like it just burned off whatever was left in the nozzle. But those gas pumps nowadays are made so that they won't explode. But I didn't know that at the time, and that was a whole nother nightmare. And we finally got there. It was like 22 hours of driving or something. We got there, and I just had the best fucking time. I slept in a tent for 5 days, and I was like, I'm a fucking juggalo through and through. I hung out with all these juggalos. It was the same year that movie American Juggalo was made. Right. The guy, Sean Dunn, the director of that, he's a friend of mine, and I had helped him arrange access to shoot that film. But like, so if you've seen the film, which a lot of people have, it was like that was the year that I was there for the first time. And I just like, I had never been to a place where everybody was so inclusive. Everybody was so warm and welcoming, and there was no judgments for anybody. Like, it wasn't like, oh, you're cool or you're not cool or you're not hip. Yeah. It's just like everyone sharing everything with each other.
Which is not like usually how music festivals are.
No, it's usually like a fashion parade. And this is a fashion parade, but everyone appreciated everybody else's fashion or lack of fashion, or like, you know, like very few people there were that good looking or that in shape. It was mostly like, you know, if you grade people on a 1 to 10 physical appearance thing, it was like, you know, a lot of 6s and 7s and below. And I'm not a fucking fantastically good looking or in shape person, you know. I fucking got plenty of extra weight on me, but it didn't matter. Like, everybody was just like, fuck it, we're here to have a good time. And I just had the most wonderful time. And then I went back the next year, and This time I rented an RV. I didn't take the bus. And long story short, like these three guys fucking beat the shit out of me twice.
It's so fucked up.
Kind of like tried to kill me, really. Like the first time they beat me up, they just kind of left me there. And then they came back like 20 minutes later. And one guy had like a brick in his hand and like started smashing me in the face with it. And like my friends tried to fight them off, but my friends like weren't in any shape to do that. And then other juggalos fought them off. And I don't want to like, it gets to be a long story, but short story is like, everyone was like, fuck those people. We knew something bad would happen to you there. And I was like, yeah, one little bad thing. And like, I should have been the poster boy for fuck these people. But I came back from that being like, yeah, but that was just those three people. But everybody else was super nice to me. And after I got knocked out the first time, everyone was super kind and like helped me to a nice patch of grass to recover. Right. And then kind of left me alone to keep watching wrestling because it happened at the wrestling tent at like 3 a.m. And everybody stopped paying attention to me, like the hurt little guy on the grass, to go watch more wrestling. And that's when these three fucking knuckleheads came back.
Right.
And that's like an outlier, you know, like those three weren't typical of what was happening.
Did they target you like this guy's an outsider, like we know he like is from New York or whatever?
Well, I had my friend there, the Juggalo thing, their thing goes whoop whoop, like that's their call, like every Juggalos just go whoop whoop. And it's spelled WHOOP. That's how you write it. And a friend of mine, as a goof, had made me a shirt that said whoop whoop, like WOOP. And I think probably because I was like wearing glitter, and I probably looked like a bit of a fruitcake. Because I had like Daisy Duke cutoff shorts on and that shirt and glitter. And I just always have glitter on hand because I used to wear a lot of it when I played in the Bee Gees band. I just like glitter. Like, what's wrong with glitter?
Hey,
it's like,
I mean, you're at a
party. Exactly. Right. But these guys, like the first time they beat me up, it happened really quick, and I didn't know.
So they like sucker punch you type
Sucker punched me, knocked me out. I woke up with no idea what had happened, and everyone was like, "You just got knocked out and beat up." And then they came back again with the brick and smashed me up real good, and then ripped my shirt off, screaming, "Take off that fucking shirt," which was the misspelled whoop. So I assumed that they thought that I was some outsider coming to make fun of them because they had gotten a lot of press the year before. And I think they were weary, like some people might have been weary of someone, like people coming back, like hipsters, just trying to make fun of them.
Right.
And I might have gotten confused with that. But like I didn't leave, you know, everyone thought I was going to leave right away. But I was like, are you kidding me? I'm not leaving because the Ghetto Boys are playing tomorrow night, and the next night Insane Clown Posse's playing, and I came to see Insane Clown Posse, and then I got to get on their stage for Fago Armageddon, and I had to wear like a big bandana over my face though because I didn't know who these people were who beat me up, and I wouldn't recognize them again because it all happened so fast. So I did live in a little terror for the next 2 days that they'd find me again, and the only way they'd find me again is if they could see my face for two reasons. One, because they knew what I looked like, and two, because it was fucking completely swollen and black and blue. So it was obvious that I had gotten beaten up, so I had to like kind of remain in hiding.
Man.
But I'll still go back. Like people assume that I haven't gone back to the Gathering because like I got scared away from it or something, or I lost my passion for it. And it's just like there's so many things I want to do in life that I don't go back to the same thing that many times. But I just watched American Juggalo 2 recently, a few nights ago, and I posted on Facebook about how much I loved it and how much I consider Juggalos like my family, and I still consider myself to be a Juggalo because I love the music, I love the culture, I love the people, and I love the passion and the inclusiveness of it. And my friends, they still don't take me seriously. Even people who know me, they're like, "You don't think you're a Juggalo?" And it's like, I fucking am, man. Like it's something I feel. Like it's not something I chose to do.
Yeah,
when I'm around those people, I feel really comfortable.
Right. Yeah, I mean it's cool. I mean, if you really think about it, it does that their vibe and the way they produce their shows and events. I mean, it falls in line with Rocks Off. You know, it's fun and like, dude, like you're like. You know, you're like an entertainer. You know, it's pure entertainment. The Juggalo shit is like about. I mean, they have maybe it gets a little deeper than that. Like they have some other, you know, indoctrines of some kind or something like that. But I mean, it's like you know, they're trying to. They're clowns and shit. They got clown makeup.
They're clowns throwing a fucking party.
Right.
And it's a fun party, man. An Insane Clown Posse show is an incredibly fun party.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's cool that you just stuck. You didn't like. You weren't like, fuck all y'all, I'm out of here, man. I'm going to go back and talk shit.
That Halloween, I flew to Detroit to go to their annual Hallowicked party. And I've been back multiple more times to Insane Clown Posse shows. And I went to a big hoodoo show, a boondock show, other Juggalo and psychopathic artists. Like, I like hanging around those people, man. I like, you know, I just had something happen to me the other day. Or a lot of days. But it was today in particular, but it's just really a culmination. And I thought of it at the post office today. I went to the post office, the woman came up to me and said, "Can I help you?" I was like, "Yo, what's happening, darling? How are you?" And she was like, "Yo, what's up?" And we just had this great interaction and like, "How you been? You having a good day? You having a good day at work? Oh, how'd you get all this energy?" She's like, "Yeah, it's my coffee." And I'm like, "Oh, well, you're probably going to crash soon. Then you'll have to have 2 coffees." She's like, "That's right. And then after that, I'll have 3 coffees until my day's over and I'll go home and I'll rest and then I'll do it all again." And like, when you start interactions with people like that in life, like, I think like so many people should try to do more of that. Like just random people you meet on the street and people like you walk into a shop, like you walk into your coffee shop or fucking bodega to buy a pack of gum. I do it all the time and I always ask people how they're doing. I just walk in, "Hey man, how you doing?" And like, especially like food and drink and retail people behind the counter, when you ask them how they're doing, they're used to everyone coming up and not saying anything and everyone's staring at their phones. So when you ask someone how they're doing, they're confused. They're like, "What?" And you walk up, "Yo, how you doing?" They expect you to just say, "Give me a coffee."
Right.
Or, "I want this or that." So you just say that and people get so thrown off. And to me, that's sad. Like how you doing should be how every interaction starts. And, and not, "Hey, how you doing? I'm all right. Okay, I'll have a coffee." But like, "Hey, what's up? How are you?" Like, just you're human. I'm human. We're here together. Like, I want something from you, but that's not all I want. Like, let's just have a small interaction. And I go to a lot of concerts, and most people don't talk to each other. You go to an ICP concert, you just walk up and a group of people are standing there and be like, "Yo, what's up, guys? What's up, fam?" And everyone's going to turn to you and be like, "Yo, what's up? How are you? What's your name? Where are you from?" And they honestly want to know. You can walk into someone's campsite at the Gathering, just walk right in like, "What's the last thing you want right now?" Your fucking doorbell rang while we were here tonight.
Right.
And you were like, "That can't be from me." And most people think what is it a comedian said recently? Like, the rudest thing someone in the world could do is leave me a voicemail. Like, people don't want their lives interrupted, right? You don't want to hear a fucking knock on your door. Like, what if it's even the guy who lives next door? If the guy who lives next door knocked on your door and said, "Hi, I'm Jim, I just moved in next door," you'd be like, "Dude, you're weird. Why are you doing this?" Most people would do that.
Right.
And I would too, because I'm from this society and this culture. But that's so fucking foreign to the way people have evolved over the years, right? Like, you used to have to know your neighbor because you'd need him to help you fucking run down an elk and kill it.
True.
Or to help fucking plant tomato gardens or whatever. And like, Insane Clown Posse to me is like pre-evolution, like it's like that type of vibe that's what I look for in the world and in life, is people who want to talk to each other and hang out and have a good time. And you don't need to have a deep philosophical conversation, just a, "Hey, how's it going? Like, what's your name?" And like, realize we're all in this together. We're all here at this festival. Like, try going to the Mercury Lounge tonight and just introduce yourself to random people. Like, good fucking luck, no matter who's playing. You know what I mean? So that's what I love about that scene and that crew.
Well, that that carries into like what your main project, like what you're doing right now, because which is running for Rodney.
Yes.
And because even with the videos, it's more than just these videos, but you've been like kind of keeping a log of this project, which I want to talk about. But the energy level that you're at and the vibe that comes across from like what you're doing with it is super. One, it's very infectious. It's like it seems very genuine too, like, and you're fucking running, man. You're running a bunch. But just really quickly, just so people, because people don't probably know, like, unless they know you, what's up with this. I think this is awesome. I think it's I haven't seen something this cool in a long time. I'm super. I admire you for doing this thing. It's super cool. So I'm curious, because I didn't know the guy too, and I know he was a very, very close friend of yours too. So if you can kind of break it down, this is running for Rodney, which is what you're doing right now.
Yeah. So my best friend of like 20 years, a guy named Rodney Speed, who was like my best friend, right? Everyone thinks their best friend's cool. Well, mine was really cool, and he was the person I met who loved rock and roll more than anyone I'd ever met before. Right. And he was a very shy character, and he came from a bad neighborhood in the Bronx, from a single mother family, and his mother died not long after we met, and he was kind of mostly alone, and we just started hanging out a lot, and I started taking him to rock shows. He was a janitor at Wetlands, the club I used to book, and he just had this crazy passion for rock and roll, but he would hardly talk to anybody, and it took me a while to get him to talk to me, and he's 10 years older than me, and something was up with him, like, and I don't know if it was Asperger's or there was something like that wasn't normal about Rodney. He certainly wasn't dumb, though he might come off that way. He was very brusque with a lot of people, but like once you get him talking about rock and roll, just fucking forget it. Hey Rodney, what was the track listing on the Beatles' first album? Well, that depends, Jake. You talking about the U.S. release or the U.K. release? Because it had different track listing. We had some of the same songs, but it had 2 more songs in the U.S. release, and it was in a different order. And side 1 was this, and you'd just be like, what the fuck? And he'd be like, well, Ringo didn't even play on that song. That was Paul playing drums on that. And like,
oh,
Rodney,
wow.
How do you know that? He's like, I read. And it's like, when he passed away, his cousin told me that he was reading at 2.
Oh, wow.
Like just picking up books and reading, and always retained everything he read. And so just crazy knowledge. All he read about was rock and roll too, like every magazine and book. So you just ask him literally anything, and he fucking knew the answer about rock and roll.
Just hearing his like description of the origin of the song "Taking Care of Business," too, where he breaks it down. Like I didn't know that shit, and like there's a whole story. This guy, because he sang in a band too, right?
Right. Well, I started a band for him in like 2001 called the Rodney Speed Experience, kind of as a goof, much like Tragedy. Because I was like, this guy deserves to be on stage. Because he can sing okay, and he can play guitar kind of okay. And I might be lying when I call his propensity for either of those things okay. Might have been less than okay. But he made up for it with so much passion. And hearing him introduce songs was just fucking hilarious. And like certain times we'd be on stage, and like he'd announce something, and he'd be like, yo, let me introduce you to my band members over there on that beautiful Rickenbacker 1963 bass. You'd be like, how'd you know that was from 63? He's like, I could tell by the cut. And I'd be like, Eddie, did he ever ask you when that bass was made? He's like, no. Then he'd say things like, over here to my left, that would be your right. And you're like, he knew that because of like watching a concert film or something. You know, like he just soaked everything in like a sponge, and he'd tell these long stories about the history of a certain song we'd be playing, and we'd be all on stage looking at him. But then at the same time, he'd be like, yo, and over here on the lead guitar, that would be, and he'd forget the mic was in front of him, and he'd turn to me and be like, Jake, what's his name again? And I'd be like, oh, that's Phil. He'd be like, oh, that's right, Phil. Because he wouldn't remember these like totally mundane things like somebody's name, but he'd know this whole story about the history and origin of a song. But what happened was I was doing this like goofy running challenge, trying to run 3 miles every day in January of 2016.
Okay.
Just because I like challenges. I like kind of putting walls up for myself and seeing if I can scale them. So I was like, okay, I'll try to run 3 miles every day for 31 days. It would be like a good New Year's resolution. So I started doing that, and then Rodney died suddenly, passed away in his sleep on January 13th. And it hit me super hard, as you can imagine, because he had been my best friend for so long. And more than my best friend, he had been like, and I wrote this when he died, I was like, I lost my muse, my little brother, my big brother, and like my adopted son all at the same time. Wow. He was all of those things to me, and my best friend. You know, like it was like, yeah, he was like adopted son kind of, because his mom died, and even though he was older than me, like I felt like a certain paternal instinct to him, and I took care of him and helped made sure that he was okay, and that he found apartments, and that his rent was paid, because he didn't always have the money, and I could take him to concerts, give him money for clothes, buy him clothes, like make sure that he was fed, like just anything. Always making sure he need like anything he needed, he had.
Just looking out for him when you can, right?
Yeah, just looking out for him, because he didn't. You don't make that much money as a janitor at a rock club.
No.
And then put him in the band, and like just loved hanging out with him, and like the joy he got from rock and roll. Like he couldn't afford to go to all these arena shows, but just sitting next to him and seeing the fucking smiles on his face and singing along to every song, every show we ever went to, like he just like felt the music more strongly and passionately than anyone I ever knew. So it was like, yeah, like if I'm going to this concert, like who else am I going to go with? It'd be Rodney.
Hell yeah.
And like so many girls over the years have been like, poor girls that I've gone out with have been like Rodney's been our third wheel, because they'd go out on a date and I'd be like, yo, next week I'm going to see Cheap Trick and Aerosmith. You want to go? And they'd be like, yeah. And I'd be like, cool. I'll pick you up at 6. It'll be me, you, and Rodney, and we'll go to the fucking Olive Garden, because Rodney loved chain restaurants, and then out to the show. And they'd be like, what? And I'd turn up with Rodney as like the other date. But then inevitably the girls would be like, Rodney's the fucking best, and you are not. Right. And a lot of girls I used to date became friends with Rodney and would take him out to the movies and stuff after we broke up, which is a testament to how fucking suave Rodney Speed was. But so after he died, like as a coping mechanism, I was like, I'm going to just keep running every day. And I decided to run for 53 days, because he was 53 years old when he died. Right. And then when that came and went. I decided to try to run for 100 days because it was a round number, and then I just decided to go for the whole rest of the year. And I call it Running for Rodney, and I started making these videos because a friend of mine was like, you should make videos to document this.
Definitely.
And there was no like plan behind it, so I started making the videos, and then I was like, well, I should make a website for it, and oddly enough, runningforrodney.com didn't exist, so I was able to get that domain, and then I just wrote a bunch of blogs about the running, and I've made these fucking fun running videos, and I just make footage of myself acting stupid, and like I've either friends film it, or I set up a tripod and run past the tripod, and I wear, crazy outfits and just have a really good time and like engage strangers.
Right. What day are you at right now?
I lose track sometimes. 3:11 or 3:12, I think. I have this app on my phone, the day counter or something.
Right.
What number day of the year is it?
And you run 3 miles every day?
Every single day, and it's hard to believe. And I've thought about cheating.
That is insane.
And someone asked me, like a couple weeks ago in London, I was out with this girl I know, and she was like, "All right, how many days have you missed though? Come on, you can tell me." And I was like, "None." And she's like, "Come on." And I was like, "No, I haven't," because I would like. No one else would know, but I would know, and I was just there. It wasn't going to happen. I ran through some food poisoning in March, where I woke up and I was like, things are not going to go well for me this morning. I tell I'm sick. I sat down in the toilet, had some fucking bad diarrhea, and then I got up and ran immediately, and I brought a roll of toilet paper with me. I was like, something bad might happen, but I ran and I got back, hit the toilet again. Like all the rest of the day I had diarrhea the whole next day, and I didn't run till like 11 p.m. on the next day until I was finally feeling good enough. And then I ran through some crazy hangovers that had me in bed until the middle of the afternoon, where I was like, Jesus, I can't even imagine running, but I'd just get out there and get the fresh air, and the running would help me out. And
you travel a lot too. I mean, that's tough to manage that type of shit, because those videos has you in, you were in Athens, Greece, right, and like Philly and
yeah, I travel a lot.
Glastonbury, and
thankfully for my work, right, and like yeah, I travel between New York and London a lot. So there's the overnight flights. Like whenever I fly to London, it's overnight, and I wake up the next day and I go to my apartment. The first thing I do as soon as I get in my apartment is change my clothes and run. And it's not easy, but it's also non-negotiable. So that's made it a lot easier. Like there's no chance, like, when I decided to do it, there was no way I wasn't going to do it. And if I didn't do it one day, then I wouldn't be doing it today. I wasn't going to miss a day. I just wasn't going to let it happen.
Right.
And I haven't. And now I'm like, I got fucking, less than 60 days to go or something, or 63, 64 days, something like that.
Wow, that's crazy to think. Yeah, because January 1st will mark the year that you've been doing this, right?
December 31st will be 366 days, because I started January 1st. And I started when it was just a thing for 31 days. I was in Thailand, and I was traveling through Asia for Christmas and New Year's, and then I was like, oh, well, it's going to be hard to start on January 1st because I'm going to go to Cambodia and then Singapore, then back to Thailand, and then fly all the way to London. And I was like, that's going to be hard. But I was like, well, if it wasn't hard, then it wouldn't be a challenge, and they wouldn't call it a challenge. So it's turned out to be incredibly challenging, but also incredibly rewarding. Just because it's like, yes, I think about Rodney every day when I do it, and I'm running for Rodney in that respect. But all the videos I make, I talk about Rodney, put his picture in it, and I just want people to remember him and think about him, and it's working because all my friends on Facebook see the videos, and because it's called Running for Rodney, hopefully they're still thinking about Rodney. I
mean, it's an incredible tribute, to just on so many levels too, because not only is it a great, note to your friend, but it's just like really goes to show you, because the discipline it takes to run 3 fucking miles a day, that's tough. I go in and out of running myself, and I used to run a lot more when I was younger and in high school and all this shit. And I live right by the park over here, and I get down, but I'll fall into real bad patterns with it. So to be able to be that dedicated, like to do it every fucking day, man, and you're like in different places, it's cool. It's dope, dude.
It's real cool. Like I know it's been inspiring to other people, which is cool, because I know a bunch of other people who've done this since I started. Like all sorts of people I don't even know on Facebook have been like, I did 3 for 31 and I did this, or you got me running, like literal strangers. Awesome. And then of course lots of my friends have been doing it, like Mark Brownstein, the bass player from the Disco Biscuits, are a real popular jam band. He did it, and then he started posting about it on their Facebook page and stuff, and then he inspired people to do it, and God knows who they inspired. So that's all really cool. But it, like, a lot of it's been the inspiration of myself. Like I wasn't sure I was going to be able to do this, and like the only thing I've ever done every single day for a year in the past is probably drink alcohol and smoke cigarettes. Like,
right.
Literally, those are the only, and breathe. You know what I mean? Like walk, whatever, eat food, but like nothing that's non-essential other than destructive things. I've never done something positive every day for a year, and that's like
I think a lot of people are in that same boat with you too, and it's a lot easier to do shit like that, to drink and smoke every day.
It is, but that shit makes you feel worse, right? Whereas running or physical exercise makes you feel better, and it's like, you get what you put in, as Kid Rock says, and only God knows why. But like things you do, like temper things that you're gonna do. So if you're treating yourself well and doing positive things, then you're gonna want to do more positive things because of it. So it's been a hell of a year and almost year, and now I'm seeing the finish line, and I'm like, okay. For a while, I wasn't sure if I was gonna make it 366 days, and now I'm like, barring anything catastrophic, like some crazy sort of injury, I see myself finishing this whole thing, and then I'm like, well, what's next?
Right.
And I want to, maybe I'll go 2 years, and that's just insanity. Like, I don't think I will. I say that now, but who knows? But it's like, I really want a day off. It's kind of gotten to the point lately where I'm like, fucking enough, you know what I mean? Like, I've proved to myself that I can do it, and now's where I need the real determination, because I know I can do it. Now it's like, do I want to do it? And I want a day off. My feet were really sore yesterday, but I went out and ran anyway.
Right.
And then just stretched, and I have this foam roller that I used because I won't give up.
Yeah.
But
you've done triathlons and marathons and stuff like that too, right?
Yeah, but never well.
Right.
That's the thing. I ran a marathon years ago, and 3 years ago in Athens, Greece. It took me 6 hours and 3 minutes to finish, which is like a horrible marathon time. Then I did the New York Marathon and really trained my ass off, worked really hard for it last year. Really hard, insanely hard. Went on an all-vegan diet for 3 months leading into it, stopped drinking, doing crazy training, doing yoga, swimming, all this for the marathon, and it took me 4 hours and 54 minutes. I'm not a natural runner, and I think that's something that's important, to let anyone know, who's hearing this, oh yeah, you run, you're a runner, that's what you do. No, I'm not. I run, but I'm not a runner. I'm not a runner's runner. I'm not fast. It doesn't come easy to me. It wasn't it was a challenge because it was fuck, this is going to be really
Well, that's
hard.
what's cool about it, man. It's you're a big guy, you're still working at it, know, and it's it's good. And there is a scholarship thing that's a part of it too, right?
Yes, I'm so glad you mentioned that, Peter, because if anyone's still listening and they find any of this interesting, hopefully they've had a good enough time over the past hour and a half and they feel paying something a little bit forward, and everybody who runs does it for charity purposes, right? You'll never open up Facebook if you have a certain type of group of friends and not see someone's gonna do a 5K for charity and they want you to donate this or that. And I did this whole thing and wasn't planning on any charity aspect. I just wanted people to think about Rodney. And a lot of people are like, what's the charity? What's the charity? Especially in England, because they love their charity runs over there. People don't run to the fucking grocery store without trying to raise money for a charity.
Really?
And people were like, what's this charity? And I'm like, there's no charity. And they'd all look at me funny. And then finally I was like, you know what? This is getting a lot of attention and picking up a lot of steam, so maybe I should do a charity thing. And so I decided, I was like, maybe I'll start some sort of music teaching school scholarship. And I thought about the School of Rock, which is a organization I've done a lot of work with in the past. Right. And I was like, I should do the Rodney Speed Scholarship to the School of Rock, and give them a few $1,000s and tell them disperse it to kids who need the help. And then I was like, that's not special enough. And then I had this idea. I was like, as I said, Rodney wasn't the best guitar player or singer. So I was like, what if I started a scholarship fund at the Berklee College of Music, which is as high level music as it can get, right? There's Juilliard or something like that, but
sure.
Berklee is for pop music. So I started this, I called up Berklee, and I have to raise $50,000 and give it all to Berklee as one lump sum, and then they take that and invest it in their endowment, and it becomes a yearly renewing scholarship. So 5% of what I give them becomes the yearly scholarship. So they invest it, and then it'll be $2,500 a year in perpetuity. And that was the important thing for me. I want a scholarship that goes forever, because I can only remind people about Rodney for as long as I'm around, and as long as I'm running, I can get people to pay attention. But if I could start this scholarship fund that'll go on well after I die, always in Rodney's name, then it's the way of making him immortal.
Right.
And I was able to choose that the money every year will go to someone majoring in rock and roll guitar from an economically disadvantaged background, like Rodney was. So I'm $10,000 away there. That's 20%.
Not bad.
Yeah, hopefully, I started with 100 days left in the running, so it's like not even halfway through its growth, like, period. And the way these things go, I hope a lot of people donate as we come closer to the end of this, and after we get over this terrible election that's divided the country. That's happening tomorrow. But hopefully, we can keep enough attention, and maybe I won't stop running until we raise all $50,000. I won't stop campaigning for it, that's for sure. But
knowing all the people that you know too, if it comes down to it, it might just take one little benefit concert from Rocksoft to push that over the edge too.
Yeah, that's like a little thing in my back pocket. Though benefit concerts are so hard because no one wants to play them.
Right.
Like, as you know, as a promoter.
But you have a lot of goodwill out there, man. And you've helped a lot of people, like, in their career too, especially here in New York City. So you never know. But
I do. So we'll see.
Right.
Like, hopefully I can raise the money just by running. But if a benefit concert needs to happen, that's not
for sure
at all outside of the realm of possibility.
Right. Well, I think it's awesome, man, and I love the idea, and it's just cool, and it just sort of like sums up like your whole vibe as a person too. And like it's always been, you're always kind of like in the middle of some crazy, unique, weird, interesting thing. So I think it's cool, man. I hope that, if anyone's listening to this, like they can at least put some time into checking out the videos too, which are all super entertaining, and like they really kind of drive the point home too.
Yeah, if nothing else, you'll be entertained. These videos are like 2 minutes long for the most part. And it's just like me running around acting silly and having a really good time. And I think it as far as everybody tells me, it translates and it makes people smile. The good time is contagious.
Yeah. And you've definitely brought a lot of good times too with your shows too, man. So I appreciate your time here today too, man.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.
For having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. On the house list, +1, me and Rodney.
Yes. Hell yeah. All right. That was my conversation with Jake from Rocksoft, Jake Szufnarowski from Rocksoft. Here on the house list, make sure you check out his web series of him running 3 miles a day, running for Rodney Speed. It's really cool. The videos are actually really cool. I mean, he's like in Greece and England, and like he's all over the place. It's cool. But it was awesome to talk to him. I mean, the lineage of New York shows that show promoting at Tramps, the Knitting Factory, his own stuff with Rocksoft, the concert cruises and Brooklyn Bowl. It's cool, man. I dig it, man. I dig him. He's a cool dude, and want to send him a shout out. Thanks. He came to the house. He was just like running around busy, so he made time to come through, and I really appreciate that. Thanks, Jake. Hope you dug it. If you know Jake, I hope you guys enjoyed that. You can check out his own show promotion stuff at rocksoft.com too. So check out that. And if you're ever in London at the Brooklyn Bowl in London, make sure you find him. He's usually the dude that's like bouncing off the walls and shit, But he's cool. It's all good. That's my man. Again, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. You can catch us weekly on iTunes, the Stitcher app, and SoundCloud. I decided I'm going to do 2 episodes this week, and on Friday I'm going to post a special episode with my man from Minneapolis, Andrew Broder, aka Fog. If you ever have dug into any of his albums as Fog on Lex Records and a couple other labels. He was also real integral in the Life Sucks Die magazine. He's definitely a figure piece in the Minneapolis underground scene. He was a DJ and went under the name DJ Andrew. But he's playing a couple shows, opening up for Bon Iver here in New York City on the 12th and the 13th at the King's Theater in Brooklyn. So I thought I'd post our conversation before those shows hit. He's mad cool. He is, he's just another cool dude. You meet these people in the course of your life when you're involved in music, Someone hit me up. I told someone about something, and they hit me up about some job, and they're like, I hope it's not about another thing in music. I'm like, man, there's like no other thing I possibly can do for the rest of my life. It'll always be something involving music. It always was. If you knew me back in 6th, 7th grade, you already knew that that's what I was doing. When I was on the radio at age 14, 15, you know what it is. Like, this music shit is my life, as it is with a lot of people and a lot of my friends. And that's why that shit that went down in Oakland with the ghost ship, that hurts. It cuts deep to people, especially, it's just it's a tight-knit family. Even if you don't know the people, like, that you're still part of a certain kind of community of like-minded people that could be anywhere. So yeah, I mean, I don't mean to go off the rails again on the outro, but that shit it's gonna continue to resonate. And whatever they did in Baltimore, shutting down the Bell Foundry, and it's just like, we're entering this phase right now where these spaces and music, live music, and places to nurture the arts, especially for, if you're under 21, it's essential. It's critical. We're at a critical time for this, for there to be places that exist to nurture young artists and people of any kind of genre or what have you. So that's my point I'm trying to make it today. I appreciate you guys listening. I know this is probably a little longer of an episode, but good looking out, and thanks for being with me here on The House List with Peter Agoston. I'll catch you this Friday with my man Andrew Broder of Fog for 2 episodes this week, and then otherwise, see you next week. All right, peace, y'all. Take care. Love one another. I love y'all. Peace.